A billionaire vanishes overnight. No ransom note, no crime scene, no body. Just an empty penthouse and an empire worth $11 billion left without its founder. 3 months later, a woman in torn designer clothes knocks on the door of a failing ranch in the middle of nowhere, Utah, begging a stranger to let her sleep in his barn. Cole Bennett should have said no. He should have turned her away and gone back to his quiet, broken life. But his 8-year-old son looked up at him with those wide, trusting eyes, and Cole made the mistake of saying yes. If you want to find out what happens when a man who has nothing meets a woman who walked away from everything, stay with me until the very end. Drop a like, leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from, and let me see just how far this story travels. The first thing people noticed about Cole Bennett's ranch was how much of it was falling apart. Not in a dramatic way. No collapsed roofs or walls caving in on themselves. It was the slow kind of dying. The kind that crept in through fence posts that leaned a little more each season, through paint that had peeled so long ago nobody remembered what color it used to be, through a front porch step that groaned every single time you put weight on it, like the wood itself was tired of holding things up. The ranch sat about 14 miles outside of a town called Ridley, which itself barely qualified as a town. A gas station, a feed store, a diner that changed owners every 2 years, and a post office that closed at noon on Fridays. Southern Utah stretched out in every direction. Red rock, dry brush, sky so big it made you feel like the smallest thing alive. Beautiful, if you had time to notice. Cole mostly didn't. He was 32, though people often guessed older. Not because his face showed age exactly, but because of the way he carried himself. Shoulders always slightly forward, jaw always slightly tight, like a man bracing for the next thing to go wrong. His hands were rough from work, his boots were cracked at the soles, and he wore the same rotation of 3 flannel shirts because buying a fourth felt like a luxury he couldn't justify. Cole had inherited the ranch from his father, who had inherited it from his father before that. 3 generations of Bennetts breaking their backs on the same piece of land. His father had managed to keep it profitable, barely, running cattle and leasing grazing rights to neighboring operations. But that was before the drought years got worse, before beef prices dropped, before Cole's wife, Megan, decided that loving a rancher was a lot more romantic in theory than in practice. She left when Tyler was 3, packed a bag on a Tuesday afternoon, kissed the boy on his forehead, told Cole she was sorry, and drove away in the same truck she'd arrived in 4 years earlier. She didn't come back, didn't call for 2 months. When she finally did, it was through a lawyer asking Cole to sign papers. He signed them. That was 5 years ago. Tyler was 8 now. A quiet, serious kid with sandy brown hair that stuck up in the back no matter how many times Cole wet it down. He had his mother's eyes, which Cole tried not to think about too often. The boy was small for his age, thoughtful in a way that sometimes worried Cole, because 8-year-olds weren't supposed to spend that much time watching the world instead of charging through it. Tyler didn't complain much. That was the thing. He got up in the mornings, ate whatever Cole put in front of him, caught the school bus at the end of the dirt road, came home, did his homework at the kitchen table, helped with whatever chores Cole gave him, and went to bed. He didn't throw tantrums. He didn't ask for things they couldn't afford. He didn't ask about his mother anymore. That last part was the one that kept Cole up at night. It was a Thursday in late October when the weather turned. Southern Utah didn't get truly cold the way Montana or Wyoming did, but when the temperature dropped, it dropped fast, and the wind came with it. Cole spent the afternoon patching a section of fence where the wire had snapped. A yearling had pushed through it 2 days earlier and wandered half a mile before Cole found her standing in an arroyo, looking confused. He'd gotten the animal back, but the fence still needed fixing. And fixing fence in wind that cut right through your jacket was the kind of work that made a man question his life choices. By the time he got back to the house, his fingers were numb and his mood was worse. Tyler was sitting at the kitchen table drawing something in a spiral notebook. Horses, probably. The kid drew horses constantly, even though Cole only had 4 left and couldn't really afford to keep all of them. "You eat?" Cole asked, pulling off his gloves. "I had crackers." "That's not eating, bud." "There's not much else." Cole opened the refrigerator and stared at the shelves. Tyler wasn't wrong. A half-empty jug of milk, some eggs, a block of cheese that was starting to go hard at the edges, and leftover chili from 2 nights ago. He needed to drive into town for groceries, but the truck was making a sound he didn't like, and the last thing he needed was to get stranded on the road with $20 worth of food in the bed. He heated the chili and split it between two bowls. They ate in the kind of comfortable silence that only people who lived alone together could manage. Not awkward, just quiet. The wind pushed against the windows. The house creaked in its joints. "Dad?" "Yeah." "Do you think it snows here? Like real snow?" "It has before, not often." "I'd like to see real snow, the kind you can build stuff with." "Maybe this year." Tyler nodded like he'd received a satisfactory business answer and went back to eating. Cole watched him for a moment. The way the boy held his spoon, the way he sat up straight even though nobody told him to, and felt that familiar ache in his chest that came from loving someone so much it actually hurt. After dinner, Cole washed the dishes while Tyler got ready for bed. The boy appeared in the kitchen doorway in his pajamas, toothbrush still in his hand. "Night, Dad." "Night, Ty. Brush the back ones too." "I always do." "You never do." Tyler grinned, a real one, quick and bright, and disappeared down the hall. Cole heard the bathroom faucet run, then the click of the boy's bedroom door. He dried his hands on a towel that needed washing, poured himself a glass of water because he'd given up beer 3 months ago to save money, and sat down on the couch. The house was quiet except for the wind. This was the hardest part of the day. Not the work. Cole could handle work. He'd been working since he was old enough to carry a bucket. The hardest part was the stillness that came after. The hours between Tyler going to bed and Cole being tired enough to sleep. The house felt too big and too empty at the same time. He'd thought about getting a dog, but dogs cost money to feed and take to the vet, so he'd thought about it and kept not doing it. He was still sitting there, staring at nothing, when the knock came. It wasn't loud. 3 taps, evenly spaced, almost polite. The kind of knock that said the person on the other side wasn't sure they should be knocking at all. Cole frowned. Nobody came out here at this hour. His nearest neighbor was 6 miles away, and old Dale Hobson wasn't the type to make social calls after dark. Could be someone lost. People occasionally missed the turnoff for the state highway and ended up on his road by accident. But those people usually just turned around. They didn't walk up to the house and knock. He got up, crossed to the front door, and opened it. The woman standing on his porch looked like she'd been assembled from 2 completely different realities. Her coat was long, dark, clearly expensive, the kind of coat Cole had seen in store windows in Salt Lake City and immediately looked away from because what was the point? Beneath it, she wore clothes that might have been elegant once but were now wrinkled and dirty at the hems. Her shoes, heels, actual heels, were caked with red dust. Her dark hair was pulled back but coming loose, and her face was the kind of face that probably stopped traffic in whatever city she came from. But her eyes told a different story. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held the kind of exhaustion that sleep alone wouldn't fix. She looked like someone who had been running for a long time and had finally run out of road. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. Her voice was steady, controlled, the voice of someone used to being listened to, but Cole caught the slight tremor underneath it, the way her fingers gripped the edges of her coat a little too tightly. "Can I help you?" he said, keeping one hand on the doorframe. "I saw your barn from the road. I was wondering if, She paused, swallowed. "I was wondering if I could sleep there tonight, just for one night. I won't touch anything. I'll be gone before morning." Cole stared at her. "You want to sleep in my barn?" "Yes. In October." "I have a coat." "Lady, it's going to be near freezing tonight." "I know." He looked past her, scanning the darkness. No car on the road that he could see. No headlights. No engine sound. Just the wind and the empty dark. "How'd you get here?" "I walked." "From where?" She didn't answer that one. Just stood there, jaw set, chin up, like she was daring him to say no while simultaneously expecting it. Cole's instincts were firing in every direction at once. Strangers didn't appear on his property at night. Beautiful women in expensive coats definitely didn't appear on his property at night, asking to sleep in barns. This had the shape of trouble. Not necessarily her trouble, but trouble that could easily become his. "Look," he began, "I don't know what's going on with you, but—" "Who's that?" Tyler's voice came from behind him. Cole turned to find his son standing in the hallway, pajama sleeves too long, bare feet on the cold floor. Go back to bed, Ty. Is she lost? Tyler? She looks cold, Dad. Cole closed his eyes briefly. Of course the kid was out of bed. Of course he'd heard the knock. And of course, Tyler was looking at this stranger with the kind of open, uncomplicated concern that only a child who didn't know enough about the world to be afraid could produce. The woman looked at Tyler, and something in her expression shifted. The controlled mask cracked just slightly, and underneath it Cole saw something raw. Not sadness exactly, more like recognition, like she was seeing something she'd forgotten existed. I'm okay, she told Tyler. I'm just looking for a place to rest. You can stay in my room, Tyler said immediately. I'll sleep on the couch. Ty, that's not... Dad, it's cold. You always say we help people when it's cold. Cole opened his mouth, then closed it. The kid had him, and they both knew it. He had said that. Last winter, when Old Dale's pipes froze and Cole drove over with tools and spare parts, even though he couldn't really spare either. We help people when it's cold, Tyler. That's what neighbors do. He hadn't meant strangers who showed up at night with no explanation, but try explaining that distinction to an 8-year-old with a heart bigger than his whole body. Cole looked at the woman. She hadn't moved. She was watching the exchange between him and Tyler with an expression Cole couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or something adjacent to it. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated, just a beat too long. Isabella. Isabella what? Another hesitation. Vaughn. All right, Isabella Vaughn. I'm not letting you sleep in the barn. You'll freeze. I've got a spare room. It's small and the heater barely works, but there's a bed and a door that locks from inside. He held up a hand before she could speak. One night, that's the deal. Something moved across her face. Relief, gratitude, maybe shame at needing either one. Thank you. He stepped back to let her in. She crossed the threshold carefully, like she was entering a space she didn't have permission to occupy. Tyler watched her with open fascination. I'm Tyler, he announced. Hi, Tyler. Do you like horses? I don't know many horses. I'll introduce you to mine tomorrow. Well, they're my dad's, but I named them, so they're kind of mine too. Tyler. Cole's voice was gentle but firm. Bed. Now. For real this time. Fine. Tyler looked at Isabella one more time. Good night, Isabella. Good night, Tyler. The boy padded back down the hall. His bedroom door clicked shut. Cole stood in his living room with a strange woman and absolutely no idea what he was doing. The room's this way, he said. He led her down the short hallway past Tyler's room to the guest room, though calling it that was generous. It was barely bigger than a closet, with a twin bed, a wooden chair, and a window that looked out at nothing. Cole's mother had used it as a sewing room before she died. He'd cleared it out afterward, but never turned it into anything else. Bathroom's across the hall, he said. Towels are in the cabinet. Kitchen's yours if you need water or something. I'm a light sleeper, and I keep a rifle by my bed, so... He stopped himself, unsure why he was telling her that. Just so you know the layout. I understand, she said quietly. I won't cause you any trouble. Yeah. He stood in the doorway a moment longer than necessary. Get some sleep. He pulled the door shut and stood in the hallway, listening to his own heartbeat. Through the thin walls, he heard her sit down on the bed, heard the springs creak. Then nothing. Cole went back to the kitchen, checked the locks on both doors, and stood at the window for a long time, staring out at the dark. The wind was still blowing. The barn was a darker shape against the dark sky. Nothing moved out there. He didn't sleep well. He rarely did, but this was worse than usual. Every sound the house made, and old houses made a lot of sounds, yanked him back to alertness. He kept thinking about the woman down the hall, about the quality of her coat, about the dust on her heels, about the way she'd said her name like she was deciding whether to give the real one, about the way she'd looked at Tyler. The morning came gray and cold. Cole was up before 5, which was normal. He dressed in the dark, pulled on his boots, and went to the kitchen to start coffee. The house was silent. He half expected the guest room to be empty. Door open, bed made, woman gone, like she'd never been there at all. But when he passed the room, The door was still closed. He could hear slow, even breathing on the other side. He made coffee, drank a cup standing at the counter, and went outside to start the morning chores. The horses needed feeding, the water troughs needed checking, and one of the fence sections he'd patched yesterday looked like it might not hold. The cold had deepened overnight. His breath came out in clouds, and the ground was hard under his boots. He was hauling a bale of hay toward the horse pen when he heard the front door open. He looked up to see Isabella standing on the porch, still in yesterday's clothes, hair retied but not much tidier than the night before. She had her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. "Good morning," she called across the yard. "Morning." She came down the steps carefully, those heels again, ridiculous on ranch ground, and walked toward him. In the gray morning light, she looked different than she had the night before. Younger, maybe, less composed. The exhaustion was still there, but it was softer now, like sleep had filed down its edges slightly. "Can I help with something?" she asked. Cole looked at her, at the coat that probably cost more than his truck, at the shoes that were designed for marble floors, not packed dirt, at the manicured hands that had clearly never pulled a fence wire or mucked a stall. "You don't have to do that," he said. "You said one night, I'm not charging labor for it." "I know, I just—" She glanced around the property, taking it in for the first time in daylight. The leaning fences, the weathered barn, the house with its peeling paint. "I'd like to do something useful." Something about the way she said it, useful, caught him. She didn't say it casually. She said it like someone who desperately needed to feel that word apply to her again. Against his better judgment, he pointed at the barn. "There's a pitchfork inside the door. The stalls need mucking. You'll want to borrow some boots. There's a pair by the door that'll be too big, but they'll keep your feet dry." He expected her to hesitate, to reconsider, to remember she was wearing $1,000 shoes and politely decline. She didn't. She turned, walked to the barn, found the boots, kicked off her heels, and went inside. 20 minutes later, Cole looked over and saw her shoveling horse manure like she'd been doing it her whole life. She wasn't fast, and her technique was wrong. She was using too much arm and not enough back. But she was doing it, methodically, without complaint. "Huh," Cole thought, and went back to his hay. Tyler emerged an hour later, backpack on, heading for the school bus. He stopped dead when he saw Isabella working in the barn. "You're still here!" "Tyler, bus," Cole said. "Are you staying?" Tyler asked her, ignoring his father entirely. Isabella paused, pitchfork in hand, and looked at Cole. It was a careful look, testing, asking without asking. "One night," Cole said. "That was the deal." "Right," Tyler said, his face falling visibly. "Well, bye, Isabella." "Bye, Tyler. Have a good day at school." The boy trudged to the end of the road. Cole watched the bus collect him, then turned back to his work. Isabella kept mucking. They worked in parallel silence for another hour, and Cole found himself stealing glances at her when he thought she wasn't looking. She was doing it too. He caught her watching him split firewood, her expression unreadable, her hand still on the pitchfork handle. At noon, Cole heated the last of the chili and brought 2 bowls out to the porch because the sun had come out and taken the edge off the cold. They sat on the steps, eating, and for a while neither of them said anything. "You're not going to ask?" she finally said. "Ask what?" "Who I am, why I'm here, where I came from." Cole chewed slowly. "Figured if you wanted me to know, you'd tell me." Most people would have called the police. Most people didn't have their 8-year-old volunteer a bedroom. A small sound escaped her. Not quite a laugh, but close. The first break in her composure that seemed voluntary rather than accidental. "He's a good kid," she said. "Don't tell him that. He already thinks he runs the place." She looked down at her bowl. Her hands were dirty now. Actually dirty, with grime under her nails and calluses starting to form on her palms. She stared at them like she was seeing something fascinating. "Can I stay one more night?" she asked, quietly. Like she expected him to say no. Cole should have said no. Every reasonable part of his brain knew that. One night for a stranger was a kindness. 2 nights was the beginning of something he couldn't predict or control, and Cole liked being able to predict and control things. It was the only way he'd survived the last 5 years. But he thought about her out there mucking stalls in the cold, asking nothing except to be useful. He thought about the look on Tyler's face when he'd said goodbye to her. He thought about how quiet the house had been before she knocked on the door. "One more night," he said. "Then we figure out your situation." "Okay. And you need real clothes. You can't work in that coat." "I don't have anything else." "I'll find something. Megan left some stuff in the closet. Should fit close enough." He didn't look at her when he said his ex-wife's name, but he felt something shift in the space between them. Isabella didn't ask about Megan. She just nodded. "Thank you, Cole." It was the first time she'd said his name. It sounded strange coming from her. Too formal, too careful, like she was handling something fragile. Cole didn't know what to do with that, so he picked up their empty bowls and went inside. One more night turned into two. Two turned into three. By the end of the first week, Isabella Vaughn had stopped being a guest and started being something Cole didn't have a word for. She woke up early, earlier than Cole sometimes, which was saying something. He'd come out of his room to find the coffee already made, the kitchen wiped down, and Isabella outside in Megan's old jeans and a flannel shirt that hung loose on her frame. She'd figured out the stalls on her own, then moved on to other things. She fixed the drip in the kitchen faucet using nothing but a wrench and a YouTube video on Cole's ancient laptop. She reorganized the feed storage in the barn so it actually made sense. She patched a section of fence that Cole had been ignoring for months because the job required 2 people and he only had one of himself. She learned fast, unnervingly fast. Cole would show her something once: how to check a horse's hooves, how to test the water pressure, how to start the generator when the power flickered, and she'd have it down by the second try. It wasn't just intelligence, though she was clearly intelligent. It was something else, a kind of intense, focused attention that she brought to every task, no matter how small. Like she was studying for an exam where the subject was ordinary life and she was terrified of failing. Tyler, predictably, was in love. Not in the way an 8-year-old develops a crush. Nothing like that. It was more primal. Tyler attached to Isabella the way a plant turns toward light, instinctively and completely. He showed her his drawings. He told her about his school, his teachers, the kid named Marcus who kept stealing his pencils. He introduced her to the horses, Dusty, Ranger, Molly, and Cooper, with the seriousness of a diplomat presenting foreign dignitaries. Isabella, for her part, received all of this with a patience that seemed genuine. She looked at Tyler's drawings, really looked at them, not the quick glance most adults gave children's artwork. She asked questions. She remembered details from conversations days earlier and brought them up naturally. When Tyler had trouble with his math homework, she sat beside him at the kitchen table and worked through the problems in a way that was calm and methodical without being condescending. "She explains it better than Mrs. Patterson," Tyler told Cole one evening after Isabella had helped him understand fractions. "Don't let Mrs. Patterson hear you say that." "I won't, but it's true." Cole watched it happening, his son opening up to this stranger in ways he hadn't opened up in years, and felt 2 things simultaneously: gratitude that Tyler was smiling more, and a deep nagging fear that this couldn't last and the boy would be shattered when it ended. Because it would end. Cole was sure of that. Whatever Isabella was running from, she couldn't run forever. People with expensive coats and manicured nails and voices like hers didn't end up on ranches in southern Utah permanently. She was passing through. She just hadn't realized it yet. But the things that didn't add up kept not adding up, and they started bothering him more. Her phone, for instance. She had one. He'd seen it in her coat pocket that first night, but she never turned it on. Not once. Not to check the time, not to look something up, not to call anyone. It sat in the pocket like a dead thing, and she never so much as glanced at it. She avoided mirrors, not obviously. She didn't turn away from them dramatically or cover them with cloths. But Cole noticed that she moved through the house in a way that minimized contact with reflective surfaces. When she brushed her hair in the morning, she did it by feel, not by sight. When she washed her hands at the kitchen sink, she looked down at the water, not at the window in front of her. She was careful about the road. Whenever a vehicle approached, which wasn't often out here, but it happened, Isabella would stop whatever she was doing and watch until the car passed. If it was a truck she recognized, one of the few that used the road regularly, she'd relax. If it was unfamiliar, she'd go still in a way that reminded Cole of a deer catching a scent, not panicked, just ready. And there was the way she carried herself. Cole had noticed it that first night, and it hadn't changed. Isabella moved through the world like someone who expected rooms to reorganize themselves around her. Even on his ranch, even covered in dirt and wearing borrowed clothes, she had an authority to her presence that didn't match her situation. When she talked, she made eye contact that held just a beat longer than most people's. When she listened completely. It was the bearing of someone used to power. Real power, not the small-town kind. And it didn't quite fit with the story of a woman who was simply tired and needed a break. On the 8th night, Cole sat on the porch after Tyler had gone to bed. Isabella came out and sat beside him. They'd developed a habit of this. Sitting on the porch in the dark, not talking much, just existing in the same space. It was probably the closest thing to companionship Cole had experienced in years, and that thought made him uncomfortable enough that he tried not to have it too often. "You're staring at the fence like it owes you money," Isabella said. "That fence does owe me money. I've spent more on wire this year than groceries." She was quiet for a moment, then, "Cole, I know you have questions. I have a lot of questions. You haven't asked any of them. I told you, when you're ready. What if I'm not ready, but you need to know anyway?" He turned to look at her. In the dark, her face was all angles and shadows. She was sitting with her knees pulled up, chin resting on them, and she looked smaller than she did during the day, less composed, more like the woman who had stood on his porch asking to sleep in his barn. "Are you in danger?" he asked. "Not the kind you're thinking." "What kind, then?" "The kind I brought on myself." He waited. She didn't continue. The wind moved through the sagebrush and made its dry, whispering sound. "Is anyone going to come here looking for you?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. "Eventually, yes." "Are they dangerous?" "Not physically, but they're powerful, and they don't like being told no." "What did you tell them no about?" She turned her face away. When she spoke, her voice was different, flatter, harder, like she'd pulled a wall up between herself and the words. "Everything." Cole let that sit. He wasn't a man who pushed. Pushing hadn't gotten him anywhere in his marriage. And it hadn't gotten him anywhere with Tyler's silences. And it wasn't going to get him anywhere with a woman who was clearly holding together through sheer force of will. "When they come," he said finally, "I'll need to know what I'm dealing with." "I know. Until then, can I just—" Her voice cracked. Just barely, just for a second, like a hairline fracture in glass. She caught it, sealed it, kept going. "Can I just be someone who lives here and works and eats dinner with your son and doesn't have to be anything else?" Cole looked out at the dark land that stretched in every direction from his porch. The land his grandfather had bought, his father had worked, and he was slowly losing. The land where he'd built a life that was small and hard and sometimes lonely enough to make his chest ache. "Yeah," he said. "You can be that." She nodded. Didn't say thank you this time. Just sat beside him in the dark and breathed. And Cole told himself it didn't mean anything that for the first time in 5 years, the quiet on his porch didn't feel like loneliness. He told himself that. He almost believed it. The second week settled into a rhythm that Cole hadn't expected and didn't fully trust. Isabella was up before him most mornings now. He'd given up being surprised by it. She'd figured out the coffee maker, an old drip machine that required exactly the right amount of force on the lid to keep it from popping open mid-brew. And by the time Cole came out of his room, there'd be a full pot waiting. She never poured him a cup. She just made the coffee and left it. It was a small thing, but Cole noticed it, the way she helped without inserting herself. Like she'd spent her whole life taking up too much space and was now practicing the opposite. The mornings had a pattern. Cole handled the horses and the heavier work. Isabella took the barn, the feed storage, the chicken coop that Cole had been meaning to repair for 6 months, and that she'd somehow rebuilt in 2 days using scrap wood and a bag of nails she'd found behind the generator shed. She wasn't graceful about the work. She still gripped the hammer wrong, and she couldn't swing an axe without nearly losing her balance. But she was relentless. She went at every task like it owed her something. Tyler's bus came at 7:15. Every morning, the boy would find Isabella before leaving and give her some piece of information he considered critical. One day, it was the name of a constellation he'd learned in science class. Another day, it was a detailed ranking of the best flavors of fruit snacks. Isabella received each of these bulletins with the same focused attention she brought to everything else, and Tyler would walk to the bus looking like a kid who'd just been handed a gold star. "He talks more now," Cole said one morning, after the bus had pulled away and they were standing by the horse pen watching Dusty chew hay with the slow determination of an animal that knew time was on his side. "He's always talked," Isabella said. "He just needed someone to listen who wasn't also worrying about the water heater." Cole looked at her. "You saying I don't listen to my kid?" "I'm saying you listen while simultaneously carrying the weight of this entire property on your shoulders, and an 8-year-old can tell the difference." It stung because it was true. Cole wanted to argue, but the words that came to mind were defensive and small, and he knew it, so he didn't say anything. He just picked up the feed bucket and walked to the barn. Isabella didn't follow him. She'd learned when to give him space, which bothered him in a different way. It meant she was paying attention to him the same way she paid attention to everything else. That afternoon, while Tyler was still at school, Cole drove into Ridley for supplies. He didn't ask Isabella to come, and she didn't ask to. He made the drive in his rattling truck, bought groceries, a new spool of fence wire, and a bottle of ibuprofen because his back had been screaming since the weekend. At the feed store, Gary Lomas, who ran the place and also served as Ridley's unofficial information network, leaned on the counter and gave Cole a look. "Heard you've got company out there." Cole set a bag of horse feed on the counter. "News travels. Dale Hobson saw a woman hanging laundry on your line last Tuesday. Nearly drove into a ditch. Dale needs to watch the road." "Pretty," he said. "Dale's 78. Everyone's pretty to Dale." Gary grinned, but there was curiosity underneath it, the kind that came from living in a town small enough that a stranger's presence was actual news. "Who is she?" "Friend," Cole said, which was the simplest lie and therefore the easiest to maintain. "Didn't know you had friends." "Thanks, Gary. I mean female friends, or any friends, really. You come in here, buy your feed, nod at me like I'm a toll booth, and leave." Cole picked up the bag and put it over his shoulder. "I appreciate the inventory of my social life." "I'm just saying, Cole, it's been 5 years. If you've got someone, she's a friend. She's helping around the place. That's it." Gary raised both hands in surrender. Cole paid, loaded the truck, and drove home with the radio off and his thoughts louder than he wanted them to be. When he pulled up to the house, Isabella was sitting on the porch with her knees drawn up, and even from 30 yards away, Cole could tell something was wrong. Her posture was different, tighter, more contained, like she'd folded herself into the smallest possible shape. She was holding her phone, not using it, just holding it, staring at the dark screen like it was a grenade with the pin half out. He parked, got out, and started unloading without saying anything. After a minute, she came down to help carry bags inside. Her hands were steady, but her face had that flat, controlled expression he'd come to recognize as her version of barely holding it together. They put the groceries away in silence. Cole waited. He'd gotten good at waiting with her. "I turned it on," she said finally, standing by the kitchen window with her back to him. "Just for a minute, just to see." And 214 missed calls, 91 voicemails, over 1,000 texts. She pressed her fingers against the bridge of her nose. "And 17 emails from my father's attorney." Cole leaned against the counter. "That's a lot of people looking for you." "That's a lot of people who need something from me. There's a difference." "Is there?" She turned around, and for a second her eyes flashed with something sharp. Anger, or the reflex of someone who was used to not being questioned. It passed quickly, replaced by something more tired. "My father left 6 voicemails. I listened to the first one." Her voice went quiet, the way it did when she was working hard to keep it even. "He didn't ask if I was safe. He didn't ask where I was." His first words were about the quarterly earnings report. Cole didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He opened the refrigerator and started putting away the milk and eggs. "I keep thinking I should feel guilty," Isabella continued, more to herself than to him. "I abandoned a company with 4,000 employees. People depend on me. Their mortgages, their kids' school, all of it connected to decisions I'm supposed to be making, and I just walked away." "Did you choose to walk away, or did your body make the choice for you?" She looked at him sharply. "You said you collapsed," Cole said, "in your office. That doesn't sound like a choice. It was a panic attack, or that's what they called it afterward, but it felt more like like the building fell on me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see straight. My assistant found me on the floor behind my desk, and I couldn't remember my own name for about 30 seconds. She said it matter-of-factly, the way you'd describe a car accident that happened to someone else. The doctors told me I needed to rest. My father told me I needed to be stronger. Sounds like a good man, Cole said, and the sarcasm was thin enough to cut. He built his first company when he was 23, sold it for $40 million by the time he was 30. To him, weakness is a moral failing. When I started my company, he helped fund it, and he's never let me forget that. Every success was proof his investment was sound. Every failure was proof I wasn't tough enough. And when you collapsed? He came to the hospital, sat beside my bed for 10 minutes. Then he told me the board was getting nervous and I needed to be back in the office by Monday. She laughed, a short, humorless sound. It was Wednesday. I'd been unconscious 6 hours earlier and he was giving me a deadline. Cole finished putting away the groceries and folded the paper bags. He did this slowly, giving his hands something to do while his mind worked through what she'd told him. "So you left," he said. "Not right away. I went back to work. I did what he wanted. I sat in meetings and signed documents and smiled at investors, and every night I went home to a penthouse I hated and lay awake until 3 a.m. feeling like the walls were closing in." She paused. "Then one morning I woke up, and the walls actually were closing in. Not literally, but I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't make myself care about any of it. The company, the money, the people depending on me. I felt nothing. And that scared me more than the panic attack, because at least during the panic attack, I felt something." "How long ago was that?" 3 months. I got up, packed one bag, turned off my phone, and drove. Didn't have a destination. Just kept driving until I ran out of gas in a town so small it didn't show up on my GPS. Sold the car to a mechanic for cash, bought a bus ticket, then another, then another. Eventually I was walking down a dirt road in Utah at night, and I saw a barn. She looked at him. "Your barn." "Lucky you." "I'm serious. I'd been sleeping in bus stations and motel lobbies for weeks. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days when I knocked on your door. I was running out of options." Her voice cracked again, and this time she let it. "I wasn't just tired, Cole. I was disappearing, piece by piece, and I thought if I could just stop, just be still somewhere quiet for one night, maybe I could figure out how to come back." Cole thought about the woman who had stood on his porch that first night, the dust on her heels, the tremor in her voice. He'd known she was running from something. He just hadn't understood the scale of what she'd been running from. "For what it's worth," he said, "you don't seem like you're disappearing anymore." She stared at him for a long moment, and something moved behind her eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or disbelief, or some combination that didn't have a clean name. "That's because of this place," she said, "and you, and Tyler." Cole picked up the empty grocery bags and put them in the cabinet where he kept empty grocery bags because throwing them away felt wasteful and recycling them felt complicated, and so they just accumulated. "Don't give me too much credit. I'm mostly letting you stay because you fixed the chicken coop, and I've been putting that off since March." She almost smiled. "Noted." The sound of the school bus broke the moment. Tyler came through the door already talking, something about a science project involving volcanoes, and the kitchen filled with the noise of a child who had things to say and 2 adults willing to hear them. Cole started dinner. Isabella helped Tyler with his homework. The evening assembled itself around them like it had been doing this for years instead of days. But Cole kept thinking about 214 missed calls, about 17 emails from an attorney, about powerful people who didn't like being told no. They were coming. He could feel it the way he felt weather changes, a pressure shift, a tightness in the air that preceded the storm itself. And when they came, this fragile thing they'd built, this routine of coffee and chores and porch sitting and Tyler's drawings, would be tested in ways none of them were ready for. It was the following Tuesday when the black SUVs appeared. Cole saw them first. He was on the roof of the barn patching a spot where the rain had started getting through, and from up there he had a clear line of sight to the road. 2 vehicles moving together, moving slowly. The way people drove when they were looking for something specific. Not lost. Not passing through. Looking. They were black, identical, with tinted windows and the kind of polished finish that said money. Nobody in Ridley drove cars like that. Nobody within 100 miles drove cars like that. Cole climbed down from the roof. Isabella was in the horse pen, brushing Molly's coat, and she hadn't seen them yet. She was humming something. He'd noticed she'd started doing that in the last few days, humming while she worked, these absent little melodies that seemed to surface when she forgot to be on guard. Isabella. Something in his voice cut through the humming. She looked up, saw his face, and went still. 2 black SUVs on the road, coming this way. The change was immediate. Everything soft about her vanished. Her spine straightened, her jaw set. Her eyes went hard and focused in a way that Cole hadn't seen before. Not frightened exactly, but ready. Like a switch had been flipped from the woman who hummed while brushing horses to someone else entirely. Someone who had run boardrooms and stared down investors and built an empire worth more than Cole could comprehend. "How far?" she asked. "Half a mile. Maybe less." She set the brush down carefully on the fence post. Her hands weren't shaking, but Cole could see the effort that steadiness cost her. "I should go inside," she said. "You should stay right where you are." She looked at him, confused. "This is my property," Cole said. "Nobody drives onto it without going through me first. If these are the people you're worried about, they don't get to walk in here and take anything. Not from my land." "Cole, you don't understand who—" "I don't care who they are. I care that this is my ranch, and you're standing on it and my son gets home in 2 hours." The SUVs turned off the main road and onto Cole's dirt drive. They moved slowly, kicking up dust, looking absurdly out of place against the backdrop of dry brush and fence posts. They stopped about 50 yards from the house, side by side, engine still running. Cole walked to the front of the property and stood there. Just stood, hands at his sides, a rancher on his land watching strangers approach, which was something Bennett men had been doing for 3 generations, and something Cole discovered he was surprisingly good at. The doors opened. 4 men got out, all in suits, dark, tailored, obviously expensive. 2 of them looked like lawyers. One looked like private security, thick through the shoulders with a face that had probably never smiled for non-professional reasons. The 4th was older, mid-60s, silver hair swept back with the kind of deep tan that came from vacations, not labor. The older man walked forward. He had the posture of someone who expected the world to make room for him, and the expression of someone who was annoyed that this particular piece of the world was made of dirt and smelled like horses. "Mr. Bennett?" Cole didn't answer, just waited. "My name is Richard Hale. I represent the board of directors of Apex Dynamics, and I'm here on behalf of Edward Vaughn." He paused, like the name should mean something. When Cole's expression didn't change, a flicker of irritation crossed the man's face. "I believe you have someone on your property who a great many people are looking for." "This is a cattle ranch," Cole said. "I've got horses, chickens, and about 30 head of beef if the count hasn't changed. Which person are you looking for?" "Let's not waste each other's time, Mr. Bennett. We know Isabella Vaughn is here. We've tracked her movements over the past several weeks, and this is where the trail ends." That's a lot of effort for one person. Isabella Vaughn isn't one person. She's the founder and CEO of an $11 billion technology company. Her disappearance has created significant legal and financial complications, and her family is deeply concerned about her well-being. Cole hooked his thumbs in his belt loops. Funny way to show concern. 4 men in 2 trucks for a wellness check? Richard Hale's mouth tightened. Behind him, the security man shifted his weight, and the 2 lawyers exchanged a glance that said, "This isn't going the way we planned." "Mr. Bennett, I understand this situation is unusual. You're on my property without an invitation. That's not unusual. That's trespassing. We're not here to cause trouble. Then you should have called ahead." The front door of the house opened. Isabella stepped onto the porch. She'd changed. Not her clothes, but her bearing. She was standing straight, shoulders back, chin level. The borrowed flannel shirt and old jeans looked wrong on her now, because everything else about her screamed boardroom. She walked across the yard toward them, and Cole watched the 4 men recalibrate in real time, their professional composure cracking just enough to show the surprise underneath. "Richard," she said. Not a greeting, an acknowledgement. "Isabella, your father has been—" "I know what my father has been. I listened to his voicemail. Did he send you or did the board? Richard hesitated. That hesitation told Cole everything he needed to know about the power dynamics at play. Both, the man admitted. Of course, because to both of them, my absence is the same problem, a line item that's affecting the stock price. She stopped about 10 feet from Richard, and Cole noticed that the older man actually took a half step back. Unconscious, like his body remembered something his professional composure had forgotten. How much is it down? Isabella, this isn't the place. How much? 14% since your disappearance was reported. And the board wants me back to stop the bleeding. The board wants to know you're alive and capable of making decisions about the company's future, as do your shareholders, as does your father. In that order? Richard said nothing. Isabella stood in the dirt yard of Cole's failing ranch, surrounded by sagebrush and leaning fences, wearing another woman's clothes. And Cole watched something happen to her that he couldn't quite name. She didn't crumble. She didn't rage. She looked at the men who had tracked her across the country, at the expensive suits and the polished SUVs and the carefully worded legal concern, and something in her face settled into an expression that was harder and sadder than anything Cole had seen from her. Tell my father I'm alive, she said. Tell the board I'm aware of my responsibilities. And tell them all that I will address this when I'm ready, not before. Isabella, the legal situation. I built that company from a laptop in a studio apartment. I coded the first prototype myself. I pitched it to 47 investors before one said yes, and I grew it to $11 billion in 8 years. If the board thinks it can survive 3 months without me but can't survive 4, then the problem isn't me being here. The problem is that I built something that can't function unless I'm killing myself to keep it running. And that's a design flaw I should have fixed a long time ago. Silence. The wind blew dust across the yard. One of the lawyers coughed. Richard Hale looked at Isabella for a long moment, and Cole saw something shift in the older man's expression. Not respect exactly, but recognition. The acknowledgement that the person standing in front of him in borrowed clothes was the same person who had built an empire, and that person was not someone you pushed. I'll relay your message, Richard said. But Isabella, your father won't accept this. You know that. My father hasn't accepted anything about me since I was 16. That's not new. Richard nodded once, turned, and walked back to the SUVs. The lawyers followed. The security man lingered for a moment, looking at Cole with an expression that might have been curiosity or warning, then got in the car. The engines started. The vehicles backed down the drive, turned onto the road, and drove away. The dust settled. The yard was quiet again. Isabella stood where she was for a long time, her back to Cole, her shoulders no longer straight. They'd dropped, slowly, like the effort of holding them up had been enormous, and she'd finally let go. When she turned around, her face was wet. She wasn't sobbing. There was no sound, no shaking, just tears running down her face in steady, silent lines, like something had cracked open inside her and was leaking out. Cole had never been good with crying. He hadn't known what to do when Megan cried, and he didn't know what to do now. He stood there useless, his hands hanging at his sides. "You okay?" he asked, which was a stupid question, and he knew it. "No," she said. "But I haven't been okay in a very long time, so at least it's familiar." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek, and walked past him toward the barn. A moment later, he heard the sound of the pitchfork hitting the stall floor. Working. Again. Like work was the only language she trusted herself to speak. Cole stood in the yard alone, looking at the tire tracks the SUVs had left in his dirt. 2 perfect sets of ruts, heading away from his ranch, back toward whatever world Isabella had escaped from. They would come back. Richard Hale had all but said so, and the next time they might not ask politely. Cole went inside and checked the lock on the rifle cabinet. Then he sat down at the kitchen table, put his head in his hands, and tried to figure out what the hell he'd gotten himself into. He was still sitting there when Tyler's bus pulled up 2 hours later. The boy came through the door, dropped his backpack, and immediately asked where Isabella was. "Barn," Cole said. Tyler was out the door before Cole could say anything else. Through the window, he watched his son run across the yard and disappear into the barn, and a minute later, he heard Tyler's voice, bright, excited. telling Isabella about something that had happened at lunch. And then, underneath it, he heard Isabella laugh. A real laugh. Small and rough-edged, like a muscle that hadn't been used in months, but real. Cole sat at the table and listened to his son make a broken woman laugh in a barn that was falling apart on a ranch that was slowly dying, and he thought about the fact that 2 weeks ago his life had been simple. Hard, but simple. Just him and Tyler and the land and the quiet. Now there was Isabella, and the people looking for her, and the feeling in his chest that he couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. The simple life was gone. He just didn't know yet what was replacing it. The days after Richard Hale's visit were different, not in any obvious way. The chores were the same, the routine was the same. Tyler still came home from school full of stories, and Isabella still helped him with his homework at the kitchen table. But there was a tension underneath everything now, a hum just below the surface, like a wire pulled too tight and waiting to snap. Cole felt it most at night. He'd lie in bed and listen to the house settle around him and think about those SUVs pulling away from his property, and he'd wonder how long before they came back, or before something worse came. He'd never been a man who borrowed trouble. Life delivered enough of it on schedule. But he couldn't shake the image of Richard Hale's face when he'd said, "Your father won't accept this." The man hadn't been making a threat. He'd been stating a fact, the way you'd tell someone that winter was coming or that a river was going to flood. Just information. Inevitable information. Isabella felt it too. Cole could tell because she was working harder than ever, throwing herself at tasks with an intensity that went past productive and into something that looked more like punishment. She rebuilt the gate on the south pasture. She cleaned and organized the tool shed, which hadn't been organized since Cole's mother was alive. She hauled rocks from the dry creek bed and used them to shore up the eroding edge of the driveway. She worked until her hands bled and then wrapped them in strips of cloth and kept working. "You're going to hurt yourself," Cole told her one afternoon, when he caught her trying to lift a fence post by herself that clearly required 2 people. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're running on adrenaline and stubbornness, and one of those runs out eventually." She set the post down, stood there breathing hard, sweat on her forehead despite the cold air, her wrapped hands gripping the wood like she was afraid to let go of it. "If I stop moving," she said, "I start thinking. Thinking's not always bad. It is when every thought leads to the same place." He didn't ask what place. He already knew. The penthouse, the office, the boardroom full of people who needed her to be a machine rather than a person, the father who treated her breakdown as a scheduling inconvenience. "Come inside," he said. "Tyler's making something he calls a volcano for his science project, and I'm pretty sure he's going to destroy the kitchen if someone doesn't supervise." The corner of her mouth twitched. Not a smile, but adjacent. She dropped the fence post and followed him to the house, and when they walked into the kitchen, Tyler had indeed covered approximately half of the available surfaces with a paste made of baking soda, vinegar, and what appeared to be red food coloring. "It's supposed to erupt," Tyler said defensively, reading their expressions. "It looks like it already did," Cole said. "That was a test eruption. The real one will be better." Isabella sat down at the table and looked at the mess with an expression that Cole was learning to recognize, a kind of bewildered tenderness, like she couldn't quite believe this was her life now and was afraid to trust that it was real. "Show me the design," she said to Tyler. The boy's face lit up. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his backpack and smoothed it out on the table, and within 5 minutes he and Isabella were deep in a discussion about lava viscosity and eruption dynamics that was frankly more technical than anything Cole had expected from either of them. Isabella drew diagrams on the back of the paper. Tyler asked questions that were sharper than a third grader's questions had any right to be. They rebuilt the volcano from scratch, using a plastic bottle as the core and modeling clay that Isabella shaped with the same focused precision she brought to everything. Cole leaned against the counter and watched them. Tyler was animated in a way he rarely was, gesturing, talking fast, interrupting himself to ask new questions before finishing old ones. And Isabella was patient with all of it, not the forced patience of an adult tolerating a child, but the real patience of someone who was genuinely interested in whatever Tyler had to say. "You're good with him," Cole said later, after Tyler had gone to bed and the kitchen was mostly clean. Red food coloring stained the grout between the counter tiles, and Cole suspected it would be there for years. "He makes it easy." "He doesn't, actually. Tyler's careful with people." Takes him a long time to warm up. His teacher told me at the start of the year that he doesn't talk much in class, doesn't raise his hand, stays on the edges of the playground. But with you, Cole paused, choosing his words. With you, he's different. Isabella was drying a mixing bowl with a dish towel, and she stopped mid-motion. Kids know, she said quietly. They know when someone sees them, really sees them, not the performance of being a kid, the actual person underneath. Is that something you learned or something you know? She set the bowl on the counter. My mother died when I was 11. After that, I was invisible to my father unless I was achieving something. So I achieved. Every award, every grade, every milestone, I collected them like evidence, trying to prove I was worth looking at. She folded the dish towel slowly, precisely. Tyler doesn't need to prove anything. He just needs someone to show up and pay attention. That's not hard. It's the easiest thing in the world. Cole wanted to say something to that, but the words that formed in his mind all felt either too big or too small. So he just nodded and took the towel from her and hung it on the oven handle, and their fingers brushed in the exchange, and neither of them mentioned it. 3 days later, the phone rang. Not Isabella's phone, Cole's. The landline, a relic he kept because cell service out here was unreliable and because his father had installed the thing in 1987 and taking it out felt like admitting defeat. It almost never rang. The school had the number for emergencies, and Gary at the feed store used it once or twice a year to let Cole know about a delivery delay. That was it. Cole picked it up. Bennett Ranch. Mr. Bennett. The voice was male, deep, and carried the kind of authority that wasn't earned so much as assumed. My name is Edward Vaughn. I believe you know my daughter. Cole looked across the kitchen at Isabella, who was reading one of Tyler's library books, something about space, with her feet tucked under her on the chair. She glanced up at his expression and froze. Who is it? She mouthed. Cole held her gaze. Mr. Vaughn. All the color drained from her face. She set the book down carefully, like it might break. I'm told my daughter has been living on your property for the better part of a month, Edward Vaughn continued. I'd like to have a conversation about that. Seems like the conversation you need to have is with her, not with me. I've tried to have conversations with Isabella. She's made that difficult by disappearing and refusing contact. So I'm having the conversation with you instead. Are you the kind of man who can be reasoned with, Mr. Bennett? Depends on the reasoning. My daughter is ill. She had a psychological episode 3 months ago and left without seeking proper treatment. The people around her, her doctors, her colleagues, her family, are concerned. We want her home where she can get the help she needs. Cole leaned against the wall. Isabella was watching him with an expression that was half fear and half something else. A terrible, exhausted recognition, like she'd been waiting for this call and dreading it in equal measure. She seems fine to me, Cole said. With respect, you're a cattle rancher in Utah. You're not qualified to assess her mental state. With respect, Mr. Vaughn, you're a voice on a phone. Neither are you. Silence on the line. The kind of silence that told Cole the man on the other end wasn't used to pushback and was recalculating. Let me be more direct, Edward Vaughn said. Isabella's absence is creating serious problems. Legal problems, financial problems, problems that affect thousands of people. I don't know what she's told you about her situation, but she has responsibilities that she can't fulfill while she's hiding on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Maybe her responsibilities are part of the problem. I beg your pardon? Your daughter worked herself into a collapse. She told me what happened. She told me you came to the hospital and gave her a deadline to get back to the office. Does that sound like helping to you? Another silence. Longer this time. I won't discuss my family's private matters with a stranger, Edward Vaughn said, and his voice had dropped several degrees. Not angry, controlled. The kind of controlled that was worse than anger because it meant the person behind it was used to getting what they wanted through pressure rather than volume. Here's what I want you to understand, Mr. Bennett. My attorneys are preparing a petition. If Isabella doesn't return voluntarily, we will pursue legal avenues. That will involve your property, your name, and your situation. I don't want to make this unpleasant for you. You seem like a decent man, but I will do what's necessary. Are you threatening me, Mr. Vaughn? I'm informing you of the trajectory we're on. What you do with that information is your business. The line went dead. Cole hung up the phone. He stood there for a moment, staring at the wall, at the crack that ran from the baseboard to the light switch that he'd been meaning to patch for 2 years. Then he turned around. Isabella was still sitting in the chair, but she looked different, smaller somehow, like the call had physically diminished her. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, and she was staring at the floor. "What did he say?" she asked. "He said you're ill and need to come home." "I'm not ill." "I know." He always does this, reframes everything so he's the reasonable one and I'm the problem. Her voice was rising, not quite to a shout, but climbing toward it, and Cole could hear the anger underneath fighting against the fear. "When I was 25 and told him I wanted to start my own company instead of working at his, he told everyone I was having a quarter-life crisis. When I disagreed with him about the direction of the company at 30, he told the board I was experiencing burnout and needed mentorship. And now, because I left, because I finally stopped performing for him, I'm mentally unstable. That's his play. That's always his play." He also mentioned attorneys, legal petitions. She looked up. The fear won. "He can do it. He has enough influence to make a case for conservatorship. All he needs is a sympathetic judge and a doctor willing to sign an evaluation, and he has access to both." "Can he actually get one?" "Probably not. I'm not incapacitated. I'm lucid. I'm functional. I'm not a danger to anyone. But the process itself is the punishment. He doesn't need to win. He just needs to create enough pressure and public scrutiny that I come back voluntarily to make it stop." Her jaw tightened. "He's done it before. Not to me. To a business partner who tried to break away from him. Filed a lawsuit he knew he'd lose just to drain the man's resources and reputation until he caved. Nice guy, your dad. He's not a nice guy. He's an effective one. There's a difference, and he doesn't care which one you notice." Cole sat down across from her. The kitchen was quiet except for the refrigerator humming its low, constant note. Outside, the horses moved in the pen, and somewhere a coyote called, distant, lonely, the sound of something wild and unconcerned with human problems. "What do you want to do?" he asked. She looked at him like the question was in a language she didn't recognize. "What? What do you want to do? Not what does your father want, not what does the board want. What do you want?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She stared at him for a long time, and Cole watched her cycle through responses. The diplomatic one, the strategic one, the one designed to manage his reaction, the one designed to manage her own. She discarded all of them. "I want to stay here," she said. "I want to keep waking up early and making coffee and fixing things that are broken. I want to help Tyler with his homework and sit on the porch with you after dark and not think about stock prices or board meetings or my father's expectations. I want to be a person, just a person, without the company and the money and the name attached to everything I do." She said it like a confession, like admitting it was dangerous. "But I can't," she continued before he could respond. "Because I'm not just a person. I have 4,000 employees. I have shareholders and contracts and legal obligations. I have a company that I built and then turned into a cage I locked myself inside. And now I'm out, and the cage is still there, and everyone wants me to climb back in. So don't." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because people's lives are attached to that company, Cole. Real people with real families. If the stock keeps dropping, if the board panics and starts making bad decisions, jobs get cut. Pensions disappear, all because I couldn't handle the pressure. That's not your fault. It feels like my fault." "Yeah, well," Cole leaned back in his chair. "Feelings are liars. I felt like it was my fault when Megan left. Spent 2 years believing I'd done something wrong, that I should have been different, better, more of whatever she needed. Took me a long time to figure out that she left because she wanted to leave, and no amount of being different would have changed that." Isabella studied him. "You don't talk about her much." "Not much to talk about. She wanted a different life. I couldn't give it to her. She left. Tyler stayed." He shrugged, but the shrug didn't land quite as casually as he intended. "The math isn't complicated. Does Tyler ask about her?" "He used to. Every night for about a year. Where's Mom? When's Mom coming back? Is Mom okay?" Cole's voice stayed level, but the effort showed at the edges. "Then He just stopped asking. Woke up one morning and didn't mention her. Hasn't since. That's not better. No, it's worse. Because now I don't know what he's thinking, and he won't tell me, and I can't fix something if I don't know what's broken. He rubbed his face with both hands. That's the part they don't warn you about with kids. It's not the hard stuff that gets you, the fevers and the emergencies and the bills. It's the quiet stuff. The things they carry that you can't see. They sat in the kitchen silence for a while. The refrigerator hummed. The coyote called again, closer this time. Isabella uncrossed her arms slowly, like releasing a physical guard. Cole? Yeah. If I leave, if I go back, Tyler will think it's because of him. He'll think he did something wrong, or that he wasn't enough to make me stay. He'll carry that the same way he carries whatever he carries about his mother. I know. I don't want to do that to him. I know that too. So what do we do? Cole looked at her across the table. This woman who had appeared on his porch in the dark, who had mucked his stalls and fixed his fences and made his son laugh, who was being hunted by attorneys and board members, and a father who treated her like an asset rather than a daughter. He looked at her and felt something shift inside his chest, a tectonic thing, slow and deep. We do what we can, he said, for as long as we can, and we don't make promises we can't keep. That's not very comforting. I'm a rancher, not a therapist. She laughed. That small, rough-edged sound he'd heard for the first time in the barn, the one that always sounded like it surprised her. Fair enough? The week that followed was the best week Cole could remember having in years, which made him suspicious because good things in his experience were usually the setup for bad ones. The weather warmed slightly. A false spring that sometimes hit southern Utah in November, a few days of blue sky and mild air before the real cold came. Isabella spent the warm days outside, and Cole noticed that she'd started doing something she hadn't done before. She sat still sometimes. Not working, not cleaning, not organizing. Just sitting on the fence rail, watching the horses, or standing at the edge of the property, looking out at the red rock landscape like she was memorizing it. Tyler had his science project presentation on Thursday, and Isabella drove him through the material every evening until the boy could explain volcanic eruption cycles with a confidence that bordered on swagger. On the day of the presentation, Tyler came home vibrating with energy. Mrs. Patterson said it was the best one in the class, he announced, dropping his backpack on the floor and climbing onto a kitchen chair so he could be at eye level with the adults. Marcus Baker's didn't even erupt. He used the wrong kind of vinegar. There's a wrong kind of vinegar? Cole asked. Apple cider vinegar doesn't react the same way with baking soda. Isabella told me that. Isabella knows a lot about vinegar, Cole said, glancing at her. I know a lot about chemistry, she corrected. I minored in it. You went to college for chemistry and ended up running a tech company. I went to college for computer science and minored in chemistry because I liked explosions. She caught herself and looked at Tyler. Controlled explosions. In laboratories. With safety equipment. Can we do more explosions? Tyler asked immediately. No, Cole said. Small ones? No. Isabella? Your father said no, Tyler. The boy sighed with the dramatic resignation of someone who had been denied something fundamentally important, then hopped off the chair and went to his room. A moment later, they heard him talking to himself, narrating something, probably a scenario in which adults were more reasonable about explosions. Isabella was smiling, not the controlled, careful smile Cole had seen in the early days, a real one, slightly lopsided, that reached her eyes and made her look younger and less guarded. She was leaning against the counter with her arms loose at her sides, food coloring still faintly staining her fingertips from the volcano rebuild, and she looked, for lack of a better word, present. Fully in the room, fully in the moment, not monitoring the road or bracing for the next crisis. Cole realized he was staring. He looked away. What? She said. Nothing. You were looking at me. I look at lots of things. Horses, fences, the sky. Don't make it weird. You're the one making it weird by saying, don't make it weird. He opened the refrigerator to give himself something to do, stared at the shelves, closed it, opened it again. You're opening and closing the refrigerator, Isabella observed. I'm aware. Is there something in there you're trying to catch off guard? He shut the refrigerator door a final time and turned to face her. She was watching him with that expression, the one that was half amusement and half something warmer, something that made the air between them feel different than it had 5 minutes ago. Thank you, he said, for helping Tyler with the project. You don't need to thank me. Yeah, I do, because his teacher sent a note home saying she's never seen Tyler that confident in front of the class, and that matters. That's not small. Isabella's smile faded into something quieter. He just needed someone to believe he could do it. Plenty of people believe in him. I believe in him. You believe in him and worry about him at the same time. He can feel both. The worry is louder. It landed like a punch that Cole hadn't seen coming. He gripped the counter behind him and absorbed it, and the worst part was that she was right. He did worry. He worried constantly. About Tyler's silence, his social isolation, his grades, his future on a ranch that might not survive long enough to be inherited. The worry was a constant background noise in Cole's head, and he hadn't considered that Tyler might hear it too. I don't know how to stop worrying, he said honestly. It's the only speed I've got. I know. You run on worry the way I run on pressure. We're both terrible at stopping. She pushed off the counter and walked toward the hallway, then paused and looked back at him. For what it's worth, she said, Tyler doesn't need you to stop worrying. He just needs to know that the worry doesn't mean you think he's going to fail. Does that make sense? It did. It made a painful amount of sense. She disappeared down the hall toward Tyler's room, and Cole heard her knock on the door and say, Hey, volcano expert, want to show me which constellations are out tonight? And Tyler's door flew open so fast it hit the wall, and 2 sets of footsteps went through the house and out the front door into the evening air. Cole stood in the kitchen alone. The house was quiet around him. Through the window, he could see Isabella and Tyler on the porch, Tyler pointing at the sky and talking, Isabella leaning back and looking up with her face open and unguarded. He was in trouble. Not the kind of trouble that came in black SUVs or phone calls from powerful fathers. The other kind. The kind that started in the chest and worked its way outward. The kind that made you look at someone across a room and feel the ground shift underneath your feet. The kind you couldn't fix with a wrench or a fence post or a rifle by the bed. He was falling for a woman who was going to leave. He knew this the way he knew the ranch was dying, the way he knew the drought wasn't breaking, the way he knew Tyler's silences weren't the healthy kind. He knew it as fact. Isabella Vaughn had a life waiting for her. A massive, complicated, world-shaking life that existed in boardrooms and penthouses and places Cole had never been and would never go. This ranch, this routine, this version of herself. It was a rest stop, a place to catch her breath before going back to being who she really was. And Cole was a rest stop too. He understood that. He went outside and sat on the porch steps beside his son, who was explaining the difference between stars and planets to Isabella with the authority of someone who had learned this information approximately 48 hours ago. Isabella was listening with her full attention, asking questions, pointing at lights in the sky. The night was clear and cold, and the stars were ridiculous out here. Thick and bright and so numerous they looked fake, like someone had been overly generous with the glitter. That one's Venus, Tyler said, pointing. How do you know? Isabella asked. Because it's the brightest one and it doesn't twinkle. Stars twinkle because of the atmosphere. Planets don't. When did you learn that? Tuesday. I've been waiting to tell someone who cares. Cole felt the ache in his chest sharpen. His son had learned something on Tuesday and waited 5 days to share it because he wanted to share it with Isabella specifically, not his father, not his teacher. Isabella. Tyler leaned against Isabella's side casually, the way kids lean against people they trust completely, and Isabella put her arm around him without breaking the conversation. It was automatic, not performed, not considered, just done. The gesture of someone who had accepted the boy's affection and was returning it as naturally as breathing. Bed, Cole said quietly. Both of you. 5 more minutes, Tyler said. Now, Ty. Tyler groaned but stood up. He hugged Isabella, a quick, fierce hug, the kind kids give when they're not self-conscious about it yet, and went inside. His footsteps thumped through the house. The bathroom faucet ran. His bedroom door clicked. Cole and Isabella sat on the porch in the dark. The stars went on forever. "He hugged you," Cole said. "He does that." "He doesn't, actually. Tyler's not a hugger. He hasn't been since Megan left. He shakes hands with his teacher. He waves at the other kids. He does this little nod thing that I'm pretty sure he copied from me." Cole paused. "But he hugs you." Isabella was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick. "I'm scared, Cole." "Of your father?" "Of this." She gestured at the dark yard, the house, the space between them. "Of how much this feels like home. Because I know it isn't. I know I can't stay. And the longer I pretend I can, the worse it's going to be when I have to face that." Cole stared out at the darkness. The land stretched away from them in every direction. His land, his burden, his inheritance. The thing that kept him anchored and trapped in equal measure. "You're right," he said. "You probably can't stay." She flinched. He saw it even in the dark. "But you're here now," he continued. "And Tyler is happier than I've seen him in years. And the ranch looks better than it has since my dad died. And He stopped, breathed, started again. "I don't hate coming home to a house with someone in it. That's all I'm going to say about that." "That's a very Cole Bennett thing to say." "What does that mean?" "It means you just told me you care about me using a quadruple negative and a shrug." "I didn't shrug?" "You were about to." He was. He caught himself and put his hands flat on his knees instead. They sat there for a long time, not talking, not touching, just two people sharing a porch, and a silence that carried more weight than any words they could have said. The cold crept in around them. The stars wheeled slowly overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang its lonely, broken song, and nothing answered it back. Isabella left on a Tuesday. Cole knew it before he opened his eyes. The house told him. The way silence has texture, the way an empty room feels different from a quiet one. He lay in bed for a full minute listening to the nothing, and the nothing confirmed what his gut already understood. He got up, walked to the guest room. The door was open. The bed was made, not just made, but made carefully. The corners tucked, the pillow centered, the quilt smoothed flat. The borrowed clothes were folded in a neat stack on the wooden chair. Megan's jeans, the flannel shirts, the old boots she'd been wearing for the past 5 weeks. Everything returned. Everything in order. Like she'd been erasing herself from the room, removing every trace so thoroughly that you could almost believe no one had ever been there at all. The note was on the kitchen table, a single sheet of paper torn from the spiral notebook Tyler used for drawing. She'd written in pen and her handwriting was small and precise. The handwriting of someone who'd spent years signing documents and reading contracts, and who knew the weight that words carried when you put them on paper. Cole stood over the table and read it. "Cole, I'm sorry for leaving this way. I couldn't say goodbye to Tyler's face without falling apart, and he doesn't need to see that. He's already seen too many people fall apart. You gave me something I didn't think existed anymore. A place where I could be ordinary. A place where nobody needed me to perform. I don't know how to thank you for that, so I won't try. I'll only say that I was disappearing when I found your ranch, and I'm not disappearing anymore. Whatever comes next, that's because of you and Tyler. Please don't let him think he did something wrong. Please don't let him think I left because of him. I left because staying would have meant dragging my world into yours, and I won't do that to either of you. Isabella." Cole read it twice. Then he folded it along the creases she'd already made and put it in his shirt pocket, and he stood in his kitchen with his hands flat on the table and his jaw locked so tight his teeth ached. He wasn't angry. He wanted to be angry. Anger was clean. Anger was familiar. Anger had a direction you could point it in and follow. But what he felt wasn't anger. It was something duller and heavier, something that sat in his chest like a stone dropped into still water. She was gone. She was always going to be gone. He told himself that from the beginning. Knowing didn't help. Tyler's alarm went off at 6:30. Cole heard it through the thin walls, the tinny beeping of the cheap digital clock on the boy's nightstand, then footsteps, the bathroom door, water running. The ordinary sounds of his son's morning routine, each one landing on Cole like a small blow, Because in about 4 minutes, Tyler was going to come into this kitchen and look for Isabella, and she wasn't going to be there. Cole made coffee. He poured a bowl of cereal and set it on the table. He wiped down the counter that didn't need wiping. He was stalling, and he knew it. Tyler appeared in the kitchen doorway, pajamas, bare feet, hair sticking up in 3 directions. He looked at the table, looked at the empty chair where Isabella sat every morning, looked at the hallway that led to the guest room. "Where's Isabella?" Cole's hand stopped on the counter. He turned around. "She had to leave, bud." Tyler processed this. His face didn't change right away. It held still, the way a pond holds still for a moment after a rock hits it, before the ripples start. "Leave to go where?" "Back to her life. She has things she needs to take care of." "When is she coming back?" There it was. The question Cole had been dreading since the moment he'd seen the empty bed. Because the answer was probably never. And telling an 8-year-old that the person he'd attached himself to was probably never coming back was something Cole had already done once in his life, and it had nearly destroyed both of them. "I don't know, Ty." "Did she say goodbye?" "She left a note." "Can I read it?" Cole hesitated. Then he pulled the folded paper from his pocket and handed it across the table. Tyler took it with both hands and read it slowly, the way he read everything. Lips moving slightly, brow furrowed, processing each sentence before moving to the next. When he finished, he set the note on the table, smoothed it flat, ran his finger along the edge of the paper. "She said I didn't do anything wrong," Tyler said. "That's right." "Then why did she go?" "Because her life isn't here, Ty. She has a company and people who depend on her and problems that she has to deal with. This was always temporary." "Temporary." Tyler said the word like he was tasting it. "That means it was always going to end." "Yeah." "Did you know that?" Cole sat down across from his son. Tyler's eyes were dry. His expression was controlled. Too controlled for a child. That careful blankness that Cole recognized because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. The boy was holding himself together with the same technique his father used, and seeing it in miniature was one of the worst things Cole had ever experienced. "I knew," Cole said. "I should have prepared you better. That's on me." "You liked her." It wasn't a question. Tyler said it as a statement of fact, the way he stated things he'd figured out on his own and was now presenting for confirmation. "Yeah," Cole said. "I liked her." "She liked you too. She looked at you the way Mrs. Delgado at the diner looks at her husband when he brings her flowers. I saw it." Cole didn't have a response for that. His 8-year-old had just observed something he'd been trying not to name for weeks, and had stated it with the simple clarity that children are capable of, and adults almost never are. "Eat your cereal," Cole said. "Bus comes in 20 minutes. Tyler picked up his spoon, took a bite, chewed mechanically, set the spoon down. "Dad?" "Yeah." "Is this what it felt like when Mom left?" The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, one of the horses whinnied. Dusty, probably, who always complained when breakfast was late. "Different situation," Cole said. "But the feeling, is it the same feeling?" Cole looked at his son. 8 years old, sandy hair, his mother's eyes. A kid who'd already lost one woman who was supposed to stay, and who was now processing the loss of another one who was never supposed to stay but who'd felt like she might. "Yeah, bud," Cole said. "It's the same feeling." Tyler nodded, picked up his spoon, ate his cereal, didn't say another word until the bus came, and when he walked out the front door with his backpack, he didn't look at the barn, and he didn't look at the guest room window, and he didn't look back at Cole. He just walked straight to the road, climbed on the bus, and disappeared behind the tinted glass. Cole stood on the porch and watched the bus drive away, and the ranch was quiet, and the quiet was the old kind again, the kind that had lived here before Isabella knocked on his door, the kind that sat on your shoulders and pressed down. He went to the barn. The stalls were clean. She'd done them before leaving, one final act of maintenance before walking out. The pitchfork was hung on its hook. The feed was organized. The tools were arranged the way she'd arranged them, which was better than the way he'd had them, which annoyed him in a petty, irrational way that he recognized as grief wearing a costume. He worked. That's what he did. That's what he always did. When Megan left, he worked. When his father died, he worked. When the drought killed half his herd and the bank called about the mortgage, he worked. It wasn't a coping mechanism so much as the absence of an alternative. There was no one to call, no one to talk to, no one to sit in his kitchen and tell him that his worry was louder than his love. The days after Isabella left were long. Not in hours, the hours were the same, but in weight. Everything took more effort, getting up, making breakfast, fixing the things that broke, which they did constantly, because a ranch in decline didn't pause for grief. The water pump failed on Wednesday, and Cole spent 4 hours in the mud replacing a gasket that should have taken 30 minutes because his hands weren't working right and his mind kept drifting to the way she'd said, "This feels like home," on the porch in the dark. Tyler was worse. Not dramatically. The boy didn't cry, didn't throw things, didn't refuse to go to school. He just dimmed. The brightness that had been building over the past 5 weeks, the talking, the laughing, the volcanic confidence of a kid who'd been seen, faded. Not overnight, but steadily, like a lamp being turned down by degrees. He stopped bringing home stories from school. He stopped drawing horses. He did his homework in silence, ate his meals in silence, went to bed in silence. On the 4th night after Isabella left, Cole was washing dishes when Tyler appeared in the kitchen doorway. The boy was holding the spiral notebook he used for drawing, open to a page Cole hadn't seen. "I drew this for her," Tyler said. "She didn't see it before she left." He held up the notebook. The drawing showed 3 figures standing in front of a house, a tall one with a hat, a shorter one with stick figure arms, and a medium-height one with long dark hair. Behind them was a barn, 4 horses, and a sky full of stars. Across the top, in Tyler's careful printing, it said, "Our family." Cole felt something crack inside his chest. Not break, crack. A fissure that ran from his throat to his stomach and made breathing physically difficult for about 5 seconds. "That's really good, Ty. I was going to give it to her for Thanksgiving. I thought she'd be here for Thanksgiving." "I know. Can we send it to her?" "I don't have her address, bud." Tyler looked at the drawing. Then he closed the notebook slowly, held it against his chest, and went back to his room. His door closed. Not a slam. A click. The quiet kind of closing that was somehow worse. Cole finished the dishes, dried his hands, stood at the kitchen window looking out at the dark yard, at the barn Isabella had cleaned, at the fence she'd rebuilt, at all the places where her presence had left marks that were going to take a long time to fade. He was not a man who felt sorry for himself. Self-pity was a luxury, and luxuries had been culled from Cole's life years ago, along with beer, new boots, and the expectation that things would get easier. But standing in his kitchen that night, he allowed himself a brief, private moment of something that wasn't quite self-pity, but lived in the same neighborhood. He missed her. It was stupid, and he knew it was stupid. He'd known the woman for 5 weeks. 5 weeks was nothing. 5 weeks was a season of a TV show, a unit in a school curriculum, a temporary arrangement between 2 people who'd stumbled into each other's lives through dumb luck and a child's compassion. You didn't miss someone after 5 weeks. You noticed their absence, maybe, the way you'd notice a piece of furniture that had been moved. But you didn't miss them. Except he did. He missed the coffee being ready when he woke up. He missed the sound of the pitchfork in the barn while he was feeding the horses. He missed the conversations on the porch, or the silences, really, which had been better than most conversations he'd had in his life. He missed the way she looked at Tyler like the boy was the most important person in any room. He missed the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching, which was a look he hadn't received from another human being in 5 years, and which he'd been too stubborn or too scared to acknowledge while she was there. He missed all of it. And the missing was going to sit inside him for a long time, he knew, because he didn't have the tools to process it, and he didn't have anyone to talk to about it, and talking about it probably wouldn't have helped anyway. 2 weeks passed, then 3. November became December, and the real cold arrived. Not the teasing cold of October, but the genuine bone-deep cold of a Utah winter. The ranch contracted around them. The horses stayed close to the barn. The chickens huddled in the coop Isabella had rebuilt. Cole and Tyler moved through their days in the small, tight orbit of 2 people surviving a season that wasn't just meteorological. Cole didn't hear from Isabella. He hadn't expected to, but some part of him, the part that he kept locked in a room in the back of his mind and refused to visit, had hoped. A letter, maybe. A phone call. Some sign that the woman who had written, "I'm not disappearing anymore," had meant it enough to prove it. Nothing came. Tyler had taken to sleeping with the spiral notebook under his pillow. Cole didn't mention it. He figured the boy needed to hold on to something, and a notebook was better than most things an 8-year-old might choose to grip in the dark. It was a Saturday in mid-December when Gary Lomas called the landline. Cole almost didn't pick up. He'd been avoiding town, avoiding questions about the woman Dale Hobson had seen hanging laundry on his line, avoiding the particular brand of small-town curiosity that was well-intentioned but exhausting. "Cole, you need to come into town." "Why?" "Because there's something at the post office for you, and Brenda says it's been sitting there for 3 days, and if you don't pick it up, she's going to open it herself." "Brenda's not supposed to open other people's mail." "Brenda's been running that post office for 22 years, and she does what she wants. Just come get it." Cole drove to Ridley. The truck made the sound he didn't like, so worse now, a grinding undertone that suggested something expensive was preparing to fail. He parked outside the post office and went in. Brenda Calloway sat behind the counter with the expression of a woman who had been holding a secret for 3 days and had reached her physical limit. "About time," she said, and produced a padded envelope from beneath the counter. It was large, legal size, with no return address. Cole's name and the ranch address were written in small, precise handwriting that he recognized immediately. He took the envelope. Brenda watched him with naked anticipation. "Thanks, Brenda." "You're not going to open it?" "Not here." "Cole Bennett, I have been staring at that envelope for 72 hours. "Thanks, Brenda." He drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat, and he didn't open it until he was sitting at the kitchen table with the door closed and the house empty. Tyler was at a classmate's birthday party, the first social event the boy had agreed to attend in months, which felt like progress. Inside the envelope was a photograph and a folded letter. The photograph showed Isabella standing in front of a building, modern, clean-lined, with large windows and exposed brick. Not a skyscraper, not a corporate tower. Something smaller, more human in scale. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, not a suit, and her hair was down around her shoulders. She was smiling, but it wasn't the kind of smile you perform for cameras. It was crooked and slightly uncertain, the smile of someone who isn't used to being photographed in moments of actual happiness and doesn't quite know where to put their face. Behind her, through the building's windows, Cole could see people at desks, working. A small team, maybe 20 people. There was a sign above the door, but the photograph had been taken at an angle that made it hard to read. He turned the photo over. On the back, in the same handwriting as the envelope, "This is the new company, 12 employees so far. No investors, no board, no corner office. I work at the same table as everyone else. My father called it a downgrade. I called it a beginning. I think about the ranch every day. I think about Tyler's volcano. I think about the porch. I don't call because I'm afraid that if I hear your voice, I'll drive back to Utah and never leave. And we both know that wouldn't be fair to either of us. But I wanted you to know that I'm here. I'm standing. I'm not the woman who knocked on your door begging for a barn. I'm someone new, and she exists because you let a stranger into your house on a cold night. Tell Tyler his drawing would have been the best thing anyone ever gave me." Cole sat with the photograph for a long time. He studied her face, the new lines around her eyes, the way she held her shoulders differently than she had on his ranch. More open, less braced. She looked like a person who had put something down and was still feeling the relief of the lightness. He didn't know where the building was. She hadn't included that information, and the photograph didn't have enough context to guess. She could be anywhere, a different state, a different coast, somewhere in between. It didn't matter, really. What mattered was the image itself. Isabella Vaughn, standing in front of a small building with a crooked smile, not disappearing. When Tyler came home from the birthday party, Cole was sitting on the porch. The boy dropped his backpack inside and came out, and Cole could see the sugar-high remnants of cake and games in the flush of his cheeks and the slightly manic energy in his movements. "How was it?" Cole asked. "Good. Marcus Baker apologized for stealing my pencils. His mom made him." "Good man. Marcus's mom." Tyler sat down beside Cole on the steps. The sun was going down, painting the red rock in shades of copper and rust, and the sky was doing the thing it did in winter, turning colors that shouldn't exist, purple shading into gold, shading into a blue so deep it looked like you could fall into it. "Tyler, I got something in the mail today." The boy looked at him. "From Isabella." Tyler went still. Completely, totally still, the way he'd gone still the morning Cole told him she was gone. But this was a different kind of still. This was the stillness of hope, which is more fragile and more dangerous than the stillness of grief. Cole pulled the photograph from his pocket and handed it to his son. Tyler held it with both hands, the same way he'd held the note, and studied it with the focused intensity of a child examining something precious. "She's smiling," Tyler said. "She is. She looks happy." "I think she might be." "Where is she?" "I don't know. She didn't say." Tyler turned the photo over and read the back. His lips moved. He got to the part about the volcano and his face did something complicated. A wobble between laughing and crying that he held in check with a visible effort that was too old for his years. "She said my drawing would have been the best thing anyone ever gave her." "She did." Tyler looked at the photograph again. He held it carefully, like it was alive. "Dad, can I keep this?" "It's yours, bud." The boy pressed the photo against his chest the way he'd pressed the notebook. He sat on the porch steps beside his father, and the sun went down, and the first stars appeared. Venus first, bright and steady, no twinkle. "She taught me that," Tyler said, pointing at it. "Venus, no twinkle. I remember." "Dad?" "Yeah. I'm glad she came to our ranch." Cole put his arm around his son. Tyler leaned into him, the way he used to when he was smaller, before Megan left, before the quiet moved in. The boy's body was warm against Cole's side, and the photograph was clutched between them, and the stars kept coming out one by one, patient and indifferent and bright. "Me too, Ty," Cole said. "Me too." They sat there until the cold drove them inside. Tyler went to bed with the photograph and the notebook under his pillow. Cole stood in the kitchen for a while, then went to the guest room, the first time he'd been inside it since Isabella left. The bed was still made the way she'd made it. The chair was empty. The room smelled like dust and cold air, and nothing else. He closed the door and went to bed. In the dark, he thought about the photograph, about the crooked smile, about 12 employees and no board and no corner office, about a woman who'd walked away from $11 billion and ended up mucking horse stalls on a dying ranch, and who had somehow turned that into the beginning of something new. He thought about what she'd written. "I'm afraid that if I hear your voice, I'll drive back to Utah and never leave." He thought about how that was probably the most honest thing anyone had said to him in years. And he thought about how she was right, that it wouldn't be fair, because his life was here, and hers was wherever that building was, and some distances aren't measured in miles. But he also thought about Tyler holding a photograph like it was a lifeline, and about a drawing that said, "Our family," in a child's careful printing, and about the fact that Isabella hadn't called, but she had written. She hadn't come back, but she had reached out. She was building something new, and she'd wanted them to know. That was something. It wasn't everything, but it was something, and Cole had spent enough years in the desert to know that something was often enough to survive on. He fell asleep with the light still off, and the house silent and the wind doing what it always did outside his windows. Moving, constant, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding beneath it. The ranch would still be struggling in the morning. The fences would still need fixing. The truck would still be making that sound. Tyler would still be a quiet boy carrying too many feelings in a body too small for all of them. But the photograph was under his son's pillow. And somewhere out there, Isabella Vaughn was standing in front of a small building with a crooked smile, not disappearing. And that, Cole decided in the last moment before sleep took him, was going to have to be enough. Winter hit the ranch the way it always did. Slowly at first, then all at once. The first real snow came in late December. Not the light dusting Tyler had been hoping for, but a heavy, wet blank piet that covered the fences and turned the dirt road into something closer to a river of mud. Cole spent 3 days just keeping the animals alive, hauling extra feed, breaking ice on the water troughs, patching the barn roof where the weight of the snow had exposed weaknesses he'd been ignoring. Tyler helped. The boy was quiet about it, the way he was quiet about most things now. But he showed up every morning in his two big boots and his coat with the broken zipper and worked alongside his father without being asked. Cole noticed that Tyler had started carrying the photograph in his coat pocket. He didn't take it out during the day, not that Cole saw. But at night, before bed, the boy would set it on his nightstand and look at it for a while before turning off the light. They didn't talk about Isabella, not because it was forbidden, but because neither of them had figured out the right words yet. She existed in the spaces between their conversations, in the coffee maker that Cole still used the way she'd shown him, in the organized tool shed, in the chicken coop that held up beautifully against the snow because she'd built it right. Her absence was a presence, which was a contradiction that made no sense and also made perfect sense, and Cole had stopped trying to resolve it. January was worse. The truck finally died. Not the slow decline he'd been expecting, but a sudden catastrophic failure that left him stranded on the road 3 miles from the ranch with a load of feed in the bed and temperatures dropping fast. He walked home in the dark, called Gary Lomas for a tow, and spent the next morning staring at an engine that even he knew was beyond saving. "You need a new truck," Gary said, stating the obvious with the gentle bluntness of a man who'd been watching Cole's finances deteriorate from the other side of a feed store counter for years. "I need a lot of things. A new truck is on the list somewhere between a new roof and a miracle. I know a guy in Cedar City who's selling a '98 Ford, running condition, decent tires, wants $3,000 for it." "Gary, I don't have $3,000. "I know you don't. That's why I already talked to him. He'll take 2, and you can pay it over 6 months. Cole looked at Gary, a man he'd known his entire life, who he'd never once had a conversation with that went deeper than feed prices and weather, and felt something he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, maybe. Or the particular discomfort of being helped when you'd built your entire identity around not needing help. "I'll pay you back," Cole said. "You'll pay him back. I'm just the middleman." "Gary, don't get emotional, Bennett. It's unbecoming." The truck arrived the following week. It was ugly. Rust-spotted, bench seat torn on the passenger side, radio that only picked up AM stations. But it ran. It started on the first try, which was more than the old truck had done in months, and it didn't make any sounds that suggested imminent mechanical failure. Tyler named it Gerald. "You can't name a truck Gerald," Cole said. "I already did. It's done." "That's not how naming things works." "That's exactly how naming things works. You say the name, and then that's the name. Isabella told me that's how she named her first company. She just said a word, and then it was the name." It was the first time Tyler had mentioned Isabella in weeks. Cole glanced at his son, checking for damage, but the boy's face was calm. He was petting the truck's dashboard the way he petted the horses, with absent proprietary affection. "What word?" Cole asked. "What? What word did she say when she named her company?" Tyler thought about it. "She didn't tell me that part. She just told me about the naming part." Cole decided not to push it. He started Gerald's engine. It caught immediately, bless whatever remained of American automotive engineering, and drove his son to school because the bus had been canceled due to icy roads. And it was the first morning in a long time that felt like something other than surviving. February brought a thaw. Not spring. Spring was months away. But a softening, a retreat of the worst cold, enough to make working outside possible again without losing feeling in your fingers within the first hour. Cole threw himself into the ranch with a focus that surprised even him. He repaired the south fence line entirely, replacing posts that had been rotting for years. He cleaned out the irrigation ditches that fed the lower pasture. He called the bank about restructuring his mortgage and sat through a 40-minute phone call that made him want to put his head through a wall, but that resulted in a payment plan he could actually manage. He was doing it for the ranch, he told himself. For Tyler. For the 3 generations of Bennetts who'd worked this land. But part of him, the part he kept in that locked room at the back of his mind, was doing it because Isabella had shown him what it looked like to work on something with intention rather than desperation. She hadn't just fixed things around the ranch. She'd improved them. She'd looked at problems that Cole had been patching for years and actually solved them, and the difference was still visible months after she'd gone. Every improvement she'd made was a quiet argument that things didn't have to stay broken forever. It was late February when the second letter arrived. Brenda Calloway called the house directly this time. She'd apparently decided that waiting for Cole to show up on his own was an inefficient use of her limited patience. Cole drove Gerald into town and collected another padded envelope with no return address and handwriting he would have recognized from across a room. He didn't open it in town. He drove home, parked by the barn, and sat in the truck with the engine off and the heater fading. Inside the envelope was a newspaper clipping and a handwritten letter. The clipping was from a tech publication, not one of the big ones Cole would have recognized, but a smaller industry-focused outlet. The headline read, "Former Apex Dynamics CEO launches nonprofit tech incubator, pledges personal fortune to fund women-led startups." The article was short. Cole skimmed it. Details about Isabella's new venture, quotes from industry analysts who were either impressed or skeptical, a brief mention of her departure from Apex Dynamics that described it as an extended personal leave rather than the messy, desperate flight it had actually been. There was no photograph. The letter was longer than the first one. "Cole, I don't know if you want to hear from me. I've written this letter 4 times and thrown away 3 versions because they were either too long or too honest, or both. I'll try to keep this one short. The new company is growing. We have 31 employees now. I hired a CEO who isn't me, which felt like pulling a tooth, but was the right decision. I show up, I work, I go home to an apartment that has 1 bedroom and no penthouse view, and I sleep through the night most nights. That last part is new. I haven't slept through the night consistently since I was 24. My father and I had a conversation last month. I won't call it a good conversation. I don't think he and I are capable of those, but it was an honest one. I told him I wasn't coming back to Apex. He told me I was wasting my potential. I told him that my potential was mine to waste. He didn't like that, but he heard it, and for the first time in my life, he didn't try to override me. I think he's getting old enough to be tired of fighting. Or maybe I've finally gotten strong enough that fighting me isn't worth it. Either way, the conservatorship threat is gone. His attorneys backed off. The board appointed a new CEO at Apex, someone competent, someone who actually wants the job. The stock recovered. Everyone moved on. Except me. I haven't moved on. I move forward, which is different, and I need you to understand the difference because it matters. Moving on means leaving something behind. Moving forward means carrying it with you. I carry your ranch with me every day. I carry the sound of Tyler explaining constellations. I carry the way you drink coffee standing at the counter because you never sit down for anything that takes less than 5 minutes. I carry the porch and the stars and the silence. I carry you, Cole. I don't know what to do with that yet, but I wanted you to know. Cole sat in the truck for a long time after reading it. Gerald's engine ticked as it cooled. The barn was quiet. The horses moved in their pen and a hawk circled overhead, riding a thermal with the lazy efficiency of a creature that didn't think about the future because the present was sufficient. He read the letter again, then a 3rd time. Then he folded it and put it in his shirt pocket, the same pocket where he'd kept the first note, and he got out of the truck and went to work because work was the only response he had to feelings he couldn't categorize. That evening, after dinner, Tyler was at the kitchen table doing his reading assignment when he looked up and said, without preamble, "Dad, are you going to write her back?" Cole, who was washing the dinner dishes and hadn't mentioned the letter, turned around slowly. "How did you know I got a letter?" "You've been weird since you came back from town. You get weird when something happens with Isabella. Your face does this thing." "My face doesn't do a thing." "It does a thing. It's like you're trying to look normal, but your eyes are doing something different from your mouth." Cole stared at his son. "When did you get this observant?" "I've always been this observant. You just didn't notice because you were busy being weird about other stuff." The kid had a point. Cole dried his hands and sat down at the table across from Tyler. "She sent a letter, yeah." "What did she say?" Cole considered how much to share with an 8-year-old. The business details, the father's situation, those were adult concerns that Tyler didn't need to carry. But the rest of it, the part about carrying them forward, about the porch and the stars, that belonged to Tyler too. "She said she thinks about us. She said her new company is doing well. She said she's sleeping better." "That's good. She told me once that she had trouble sleeping. She said her brain didn't have an off switch. She told you that? Yeah. When we were looking at stars, she said nighttime was hard because everything got louder when it got quiet. I told her I understood that because sometimes when I'm trying to sleep, I think about Mom and it gets really loud in my head. Cole's hands went still on the table. Tyler had never, not once, not in 3 years, voluntarily mentioned thinking about Megan. The therapist Cole had taken him to twice, before the cost became prohibitive, had said Tyler was processing internally and that he'd talk when he was ready. Cole had waited and waited, and the boy had stayed sealed. But he told Isabella, on the porch, under the stars. He told a woman he'd known for a few weeks, something he hadn't told his own father in 3 years. What did she say? Cole asked carefully. When you told her that? She said the loud thoughts aren't the enemy. She said they're just feelings that didn't get enough attention during the day, so they come out at night when there's no competition. She said the trick isn't to make them quiet. It's to listen to them so they feel heard, and then they go away on their own. That's actually pretty smart. She's really smart, Dad. I know she is. Tyler closed his reading book. You should write her back. Tyler, I'm serious. She wrote you 2 letters and you haven't written her anything. That's rude. It's complicated, bud. You always say that when you mean you're scared. Cole opened his mouth, closed it. His 8-year-old had just called him out with the precision of a surgical instrument. And the worst part was that the kid was right. He was scared, not of Isabella, of what writing to her would mean, of what it would start, of the possibility that it would lead somewhere he couldn't follow, or somewhere that would end with Tyler getting hurt again. I'll think about it, Cole said. That means you'll think about it for 3 weeks and then decide not to do it. It means I'll think about it. Tyler gave him a look that was so much like Megan's it made Cole's breath catch. That particular blend of affection and exasperation that said, I love you, but you're being an idiot. Then the boy gathered his book and went to his room. Cole sat at the table. He pulled the letter from his pocket and read it one more time. I carry you, Cole. 4 words, simple, direct. The kind of sentence a person writes when they've stripped away everything performative and left only what's true. He got up, found a pen and a piece of paper. Not from Tyler's notebook this time, just a blank sheet from the printer he barely used. He sat back down. He wrote, Isabella. Then he sat there for 20 minutes because every sentence he composed in his head sounded either too much or not enough. And he'd never been a man who was good with words on paper. He was good with fences and feed schedules and getting up at 5 in the morning when every part of him wanted to stay in bed. Words were someone else's skill. He tried again. Isabella? Tyler named the new truck Gerald. The ranch is still standing. I read your letter in the truck because I didn't trust myself to read it in the house where Tyler could see my face, which apparently does a thing when something happens with you. He told me I should write you back. He said not writing is rude, and he's probably right, because the kid is right about most things lately, which is either a good sign or a terrifying one depending on the day. I don't know how to say what I want to say, so I'm going to say it badly, and you can translate it into something that sounds smarter. I'm glad you're sleeping. I'm glad you built something new. I'm glad your father backed off. I'm glad the stock recovered and the board has a new CEO and the legal stuff is done. I'm glad about all of it. What I'm not glad about is that the porch is empty. I'm not glad that I still make 2 cups of coffee in the morning and have to pour one out. I'm not glad that Tyler drew a picture of our family and you're in it and you never saw it. You said you carry us. I need you to know that we carry you too. Tyler carries you in his coat pocket. Literally, your photograph is in there right now, and he thinks I don't know. I carry you in the guest room I haven't opened since you left. I carry you in the chicken coop that's the only thing on this property that's actually built right. I don't know what comes next. I've never known what comes next. I just get up and work and hope the fences hold. But if you ever want to see those stars again, the porch is still here. Cole. He read it over. It was clumsy and unpolished and probably too long, and it said things he hadn't planned on saying and would be embarrassed about later. He folded it, put it in an envelope, and wrote Isabella Vaughn on the front. Then he realized he didn't have an address. He sat there, staring at the envelope, and almost laughed at the absurdity of it. He'd spent an hour composing the most emotionally exposed letter of his life, and he had nowhere to send it. He put the letter in the kitchen drawer, the one that held rubber bands, dead batteries, and a screwdriver that didn't fit anything in the house. The junk drawer. His love letter, because that's what it was, even if he'd die before calling it that, went into the junk drawer next to a roll of electrical tape. March arrived. The snow retreated. The mud dried. The ranch woke up the way it did every spring. Reluctantly, stubbornly, like an old man getting out of a chair. Cole started preparing for calving season, which was optimistic given the size of his herd, but necessary if he wanted to keep the operation going another year. Tyler turned 9 in the second week of March. Cole made a cake from a box mix that turned out lopsided and slightly burned on one side, and Tyler declared it the best cake he'd ever had, which was either genuine or diplomatic, and Cole didn't care which. "What do you want for your birthday, Ty?" They were sitting at the table, eating lopsided cake, and Tyler had frosting on his nose. "A dog," Tyler said. "Besides a dog. 2 dogs." "Tyler," the boy grinned, "I want to go camping, like real camping, with a fire and sleeping bags and everything. We live on a ranch. Our whole life is basically camping. But we never do it on purpose. I want to do it on purpose. Up in the mountains somewhere. Just us." Cole looked at his son. 9 years old now. A little taller, a little less fragile looking, still too serious for his age, but with cracks in the seriousness where light was getting through. The boy was healing. Slowly, unevenly, in the way that actual healing happens. Not a clean line from broken to fixed, but a messy, non-linear process full of setbacks and surprises and moments of unexpected strength. "Okay," Cole said. "Camping. First weekend in April when the weather breaks. Promise?" "Promise." Tyler ate another piece of cake and got frosting on his other cheek, and Cole let him because some messes aren't worth cleaning up. The camping trip happened on the second weekend of April because the first weekend brought rain. They drove Gerald up into the Dixie National Forest, found a spot by a creek that was running high with snowmelt, and set up a tent that Cole hadn't used since before Tyler was born. The tent smelled like mildew, and one of the poles was bent, but it stood, and Tyler pronounced it perfect. They built a fire. They cooked hot dogs on sticks, burned on the outside, cold in the middle, the way camp hot dogs are supposed to be. They sat by the fire and listened to the creek and the wind in the pines, and for the first time in months, the silence between them didn't feel heavy. It felt clean, light, the silence of 2 people who are comfortable enough to simply exist in the same space. "Dad?" "Yeah. I think about Mom sometimes." Cole kept his eyes on the fire. "I know you do." "Not in a sad way. Well, sometimes in a sad way. But mostly I just wonder what she's doing. Like, is she happy wherever she is? Does she have a house? Does she think about me?" "I think she thinks about you, Ty." "You don't know that." "No, I don't, but I think it anyway." Tyler poked the fire with a stick. Sparks rose and disappeared into the dark above them. "Isabella said something to me once," Tyler said. "She said that people leave for their own reasons, and those reasons almost never have anything to do with the people they leave behind. She said her mom died and her dad was still there, but it felt like he left too, and for a long time she thought it was her fault, like she wasn't enough to make him stay present." "When did she tell you all this?" "Different times. She told me things when we were working. She said work is when the truth comes out because your hands are busy and your mouth forgets to be careful." Cole stared at his son. The firelight made Tyler's face look older, the shadows deepening the angles that were starting to emerge as the boy grew. He was going to look like Cole one day, everyone said, but his eyes would always be Megan's. "She was right," Tyler continued, "about the leaving. I used to think Mom left because I wasn't good enough. But that doesn't make sense because I was 3 and 3-year-olds don't have to be good enough for anything. She left because of her own stuff, her own reasons." "Yeah, bud, she did." "And Isabella left because of her own reasons too, but her reasons are different because she didn't want to go. Mom wanted to go. Isabella didn't." Cole's throat tightened. "How do you know that?" "Because she cried in the barn once. She didn't know I was there. I came in to feed Molly, and I heard her crying behind the hay bales. I didn't say anything, but I just went back outside and came in again louder so she'd know I was coming. When I got to her, she'd wiped her face and she was smiling, but her eyes were still red." "When was this?" The week before she left. I think she was already deciding. Cole sat with this for a while. The fire popped and settled. An owl called from somewhere in the pines. A low, hollow sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Dad, can I ask you something serious? Always. Do you love her? The question hung in the air between them, lit by firelight, surrounded by forest, and Cole understood that his son was asking not out of childish curiosity, but out of genuine need to understand. Tyler was 9 years old, and he'd already learned that people leave, and now he was trying to figure out the rules. Why some people stay, and some people go, and whether love has anything to do with the difference. Yeah, Cole said. I think I do. Then why don't you tell her? Because telling someone you love them doesn't automatically fix the distance between your lives. She's building something important. I'm running this ranch. Those are different worlds, Ty. They don't have to be. It's not that simple. Tyler set down his stick and looked at his father with an expression that was absolutely, devastatingly clear. You always say that, and it's never true. It is that simple. You just make it complicated because you're afraid. The creek ran. The fire burned. The owl called again. When did you get so smart? Cole asked. I've always been this smart. You're just now catching up. Cole laughed. A real laugh, full and rough, the kind that comes from a place deeper than humor. Tyler grinned at him across the fire. That quick, bright grin that Cole loved more than anything on earth. And for a moment, everything was simple. A father and a son, sitting by a fire in the mountains, telling each other the truth. They slept in the tent that night, and Cole lay awake for a long time listening to Tyler breathe and thinking about what his son had said. It is that simple. You just make it complicated because you're afraid. 9 years old. The kid was 9. They drove home the next afternoon, sunburned and smelling like smoke, and when Cole pulled Gerald up to the house, there was a car parked in front of the barn. Not a black SUV, not a rental. A blue sedan, dusty from the road, with Colorado plates and a crack in the windshield. Cole stopped the truck. Tyler sat up in the passenger seat. There was a woman sitting on the porch. She was wearing jeans and a sweater and flat shoes. No heels, no designer coat, nothing that said money or power or a world beyond this one. Her hair was down around her shoulders. She was holding a cup of coffee, Cole's coffee, from Cole's kitchen, which meant she'd found the spare key he kept under the broken flower pot by the back door. She stood up when she saw the truck. Tyler made a sound. Not a word. A sound, something between a gasp and a shout, pure and involuntary, the kind of noise a person makes when something they'd given up on suddenly appears in front of them. Dad! 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 I see her, Ty. It's Isabella. I know. Cole parked the truck. Tyler was out the door before the engine stopped, running across the yard in the way that only children run. Full tilt, no reservation, arms pumping, feet barely touching the ground. Isabella came down the porch steps and crouched, and Tyler hit her like a small sunburned missile, and she caught him and held him, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Cole got out of the truck slowly. He walked across the yard the way he did everything, deliberately, without hurry, giving himself time to arrange his face into something that didn't reveal everything he was feeling. He stopped about 6 feet from the porch. Isabella looked up at him over Tyler's shoulder. Her eyes were wet. Her smile was crooked. She looked like the photograph, but better, because photographs don't breathe, and they don't hold your son like he's the most important thing in the world. Hi, she said. You found the spare key. Under the flower pot, you should find a better hiding spot. You drove from Colorado. I drove from Denver. It took 11 hours. Gerald's replacement windshield is going to cost about $200. That's not Gerald's replacement. Gerald is the truck. She laughed, that rough-edged, surprised laugh he'd been hearing in his memory for months. Tyler still hadn't let go of her. Tyler, Cole said gently, let her breathe. No. Tyler's voice was muffled against Isabella's shoulder. Not yet. Isabella's arms tightened around the boy. She closed her eyes and pressed her face against the top of his head, and Cole watched a tear run down her cheek and disappear into his son's hair. Eventually, Tyler pulled back, holding Isabella at arm's length like he needed to verify she was real. You came back. I came back. Are you staying? Isabella looked at Cole. The question wasn't really Tyler's to ask, and all three of them knew it. I got your letter, she said to Cole. From Brenda. Cole blinked. I didn't send a letter. I didn't have your address. Brenda Calloway has been opening your mail for 22 years. She found the letter in your junk drawer when she came by to drop off a package you weren't home to receive, read it, got your neighbor Dale's email address, and somehow tracked down my office in Denver through a chain of people I still haven't fully traced. She sent me the letter with a note that said, and I'm quoting, "This man is too stupid to mail his own feelings. Please come get him." Cole stared at her. Then he turned and stared at the road that led to Ridley, as if he could see Brenda Calloway's post office from here, and made a mental note to have a conversation with Brenda that would be either furious or grateful, depending on how the next 5 minutes went. She had no right to do that, he said. She had every right. Someone needed to. You were going to think about it for 3 weeks and then decide not to do it. Tyler told me. Brenda told me. Even Gary at the feed store sent a message through Dale that said, and again I'm quoting, "The man's hopeless. Send help." Is there anyone in this town who isn't involved in my personal life? Apparently not. And honestly, Cole, based on what I've seen, they're better at managing it than you are. Tyler was looking between them with the expression of a child watching a tennis match, his head swiveling back and forth, a grin spreading across his face. So, Cole said, you drove 11 hours because Brenda Calloway stole a letter from my junk drawer. I drove 11 hours because you wrote that the porch is still here, and because Tyler's photograph is in his coat pocket, and because you make 2 cups of coffee every morning and pour one out. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were doing the thing that eyes do when a person is holding themselves together through will alone. I drove 11 hours because I spent 5 months building a new life and proving I could do it without you, and I can. I can do it without you. I'm strong enough and stable enough and healed enough to do it on my own. She paused. But I don't want to. The yard was quiet. The horses stood at the fence line, watching with the placid disinterest of animals who have no stake in human drama. A hawk circled overhead. The sun was getting low, painting everything in that late afternoon gold that made the red rock look like it was on fire. The company is in Denver, Cole said. The company has a CEO who isn't me. I work remotely 3 days a week already. Denver is an 11-hour drive or a 2-hour flight, and I've done harder commutes for worse reasons. This ranch is failing. This ranch needs investment and a business plan, and someone who understands operational efficiency. I built an $11 billion company. I think I can handle a cattle ranch. The guest room heater barely works. I'll fix it. Tyler gets attached, you know that. If this doesn't work, Cole. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the new lines around her eyes, and the way her hair had a streak of early gray at the left temple that she hadn't had before. Close enough that he could see she was shaking, not from cold, not from fear, but from the effort of standing in front of someone and being completely honest. I'm not promising perfection. I don't do perfection. I tried that, and it nearly killed me. I'm promising effort, every single day, the kind of effort that gets up early and makes coffee and fixes things that are broken and sits on porches in the dark. That's what I have. That's all I have. Tyler was still standing beside her, and he slipped his hand into hers with the casual certainty of a child who has already made his decision and is waiting for the adults to catch up. Cole looked at them. The woman and his son, standing on his dirt yard, in front of his falling-apart barn, on his slowly dying ranch in the middle of nowhere, Utah. 2 people who had found each other through a combination of desperation and luck and a cold night and a child's compassion. 2 people who were looking at him like he was the answer to a question they'd both been asking for a long time. He thought about his father, who had worked this land until his body gave out, and who had told Cole exactly once, near the end, that the ranch was never about the land. The land's just dirt, his father had said. It's the people on it that make it something. He thought about Megan, who had left because she wanted a different life, and who had been right to leave, even though it had taken Cole years to admit that. Some people aren't meant to stay. That's not a failure. That's just the truth. He thought about Tyler, who had been carrying a photograph in his coat pocket for months, who had told Isabella things he'd never told his father, who had drawn a picture that said, "Our family," and never gotten to give it away. He thought about all the mornings he'd poured out that second cup of coffee. "The chicken coop," he said. Isabella blinked. "What?" "You said you'd fix the heater, but the chicken coop is the only thing on this property that's actually built right, and you built it. So maybe start with the other stuff." She stared at him. Then her face did something he'd never seen it do before. It crumbled. Not in a sad way. In the way a wall crumbles when it's no longer needed, when the siege is over and the gates are open and there's no point holding up something that was only there for protection. "Is that a yes?" she whispered. The porch is yours if you want it." "I want it." "Then it's a yes." Tyler let out a whoop, loud, uncontained, the sound of a 9-year-old whose world had just rearranged itself into a shape that made sense, and grabbed Isabella's hand and started pulling her toward the barn. "You have to see Cooper. He got so big, and Dusty's being weird about his left back hoof, and I have so many drawings to show you, and Dad named the truck Gerald, which isn't even a good name." "It's a great name," Cole called after them. "It's a terrible name," Tyler shouted back, and Isabella laughed, and the sound of it carried across the yard and up into the wide, indifferent sky. Cole stood where he was for a moment. The sun was going down. The ranch spread out around him. The leaning fences, the weathered barn, the house with its peeling paint and its broken porch step and its guest room where the heater barely worked. All of it the same. All of it exactly as it had been that cold October night when a stranger knocked on his door. Except now there were 2 people in his barn instead of 1. And the silence that had lived in his house for 5 years was being replaced by something louder and messier and infinitely more terrifying. He walked to the barn. Tyler was showing Isabella the horses, narrating their individual personalities and recent behaviors with the authority of a seasoned veterinarian. Isabella was listening, really listening, the way she always had, with her full attention, with her whole self, with the focused intensity of a woman who had learned the hard way that being present was the most valuable thing a person could offer. She looked up when Cole walked in. Their eyes met across the barn, over Tyler's head, through the dust motes floating in the last light of the day. She didn't smile. Neither did he. The moment was too full for smiling, too weighted with everything that had happened and everything that might happen, and the terrifying, exhilarating uncertainty of 2 imperfect people deciding to try. "Welcome back," Cole said. "Thank you for letting me in," she said. Again. Tyler, oblivious to the gravity of the exchange happening above him, tugged Isabella toward Cooper's stall. "Come on, you have to feel his nose. He has the softest nose." They went. Cole leaned against the barn door and watched them, and he felt the thing in his chest shift one more time. Not a crack this time, not a break. A settling. Like a foundation finding its level after years of being off balance. That evening, they ate dinner together at the kitchen table. Spaghetti, because it was the only thing Cole could make in large enough quantities that everyone got full. Tyler talked non-stop. Isabella ate 2 helpings, and when Cole raised an eyebrow, she said, "I drove 11 hours on gas station coffee and a granola bar. Don't judge me." "I'm not judging. I'm impressed." "You should be." "I also changed a tire outside of Green River. In heels." "You wore heels to drive to a ranch?" "I wore heels because I was in a meeting when I decided to come, and I didn't stop to change because I was afraid I'd talk myself out of it." "So you drove 11 hours in heels?" "I drove 11 hours in heels, changed a tire and a dress, and walked onto your porch with coffee I made using your terrible coffee maker." "Yes." Tyler was grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. "This is the best day," he announced. "Better than the volcano." "Don't tell Mrs. Patterson that," Cole said. "I'm going to tell everyone." "Please don't." I'm going to tell Marcus Baker first because he said people don't come back and I told him they do. And he said I was wrong, and now I'm right." Isabella reached across the table and squeezed Tyler's hand. "You were right, Tyler." "I know. I'm right about most things." "Don't encourage him," Cole said. Later, after Tyler had gone to bed, with the photograph on his nightstand and the notebook under his pillow and a smile on his face that Cole hadn't seen in months, Cole and Isabella sat on the porch. The stars were out. Venus was bright and steady, no twinkle. He told me something once, Isabella said, about the stars. He said Venus doesn't twinkle because it's a planet, not a star. He said stars twinkle because the atmosphere gets in the way. He told me that too, multiple times. He's going to be something, that kid. He already is something. She pulled her knees up the way she used to, feet on the step, arms wrapped around her shins, chin resting on her knees. The posture of a woman who had learned to make herself small and was slowly unlearning it. "I'm scared," she said. "You said that before. The first time. Same porch. Same fear. Different version. Last time I was scared of how much this felt like home. Now I'm scared of the same thing, but I'm also scared of messing it up. I've never been good at the ordinary stuff, Cole. I'm good at building companies and solving problems and working until I collapse. I'm not good at sitting still. I'm not good at being present without a goal. The goal is sitting still." "That doesn't make sense." "Sure it does. You spent 30 years learning how to run. Now you're learning how to stop. That's the goal." She looked at him sideways. "Since when are you wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm a rancher who can't afford a therapist, so I think too much while fixing fences." She laughed, and the sound of it in the night air was the best thing Cole had heard in a long time. Not because it was beautiful. It wasn't. It was rough and unpolished and slightly too loud and exactly, perfectly human. They sat on the porch, and the stars turned overhead, and the wind moved through the sage brush, and the ranch settled around them like a living thing finding its rest. Nothing was fixed. The fences still leaned, the house still creaked, the truck still made a sound Cole didn't like. Tyler was still a boy carrying more inside him than any child should have to carry. But the porch wasn't empty. And sometimes, not always, not perfectly, not in any way that a storybook would recognize, sometimes that's enough. A porch that isn't empty. A cup of coffee that doesn't get poured out. A 9-year-old boy who was right about most things, including the fact that people do come back. Cole looked at Isabella. She was watching the stars with her chin on her knees, and her face in the dark was all angles and shadows. And she was not perfect, and she was not fixed, and she was not the answer to every problem his life had ever produced. She was a woman who had broken under the weight of a life that didn't fit her, and who had rebuilt herself from the ground up, and who had driven 11 hours in heels to sit on a broken porch in Utah because a postmistress had stolen a letter from a junk drawer. She was messy and scared and stubborn and brilliant and damaged and present. She was here. And out in the dark, the land stretched away from them in every direction. Red rock and dry brush and sky so big it made you feel like the smallest thing alive. Beautiful, if you had time to notice. Cole noticed.